where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies. Libya has become a major transit route for refugees.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Indeed, it is Talk. A very good morning to you. Happy Boxing Day. It's just gone 3 minutes past 10, and this is Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you. Oh, that's nice music, isn't it? How lovely is that? Nice and festive. Thank you very much indeed for choosing the home of common sense and, of course, the home of free speech. This is Talk, and I'll be with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Whatever you're up to today, I really hope that you will stick with us for all of that, because we've got a cracking show ahead, and absolutely I must insist on getting your opinion on air, because it's very simple. Here at Talk, your opinion matters. And I hear you crying out saying, well, what are you talking about? Well, the main thing I want to speak to you about is about the King's speech yesterday that we heard. Well, you might not have done, but we'll play you a clip in a bit if you haven't, just in case. But yesterday, His Majesty used his speech to try and encourage the country to come together, and in particular different communities to come together. And I guess that I wondered, how do you interpret that? Because when I first heard it, I thought actually all he's doing is he's highlighting how he can probably tell that the layout of the country and, if you like, the face of the country has changed probably beyond recognition to many of us over the years. But he also sees that we're quite a divided nation. And therefore he wants people, regardless of their backgrounds and regardless of their beliefs, to make sure that they come together as one. The King has rather famously said that he, rather than being referred to as the guardian of the faith or the keeper of the faith, he wants to be the guardian or the keeper of the faiths in the plural. So he actually wants to ensure that he is seen as, if you like, a figurehead to all religious denominations. And as much as I understand where that premise comes from, of course, he's basically saying that he recognises that there are many different religions now in the UK, and he wants everyone to come together. Well, that's all well and good, and it's a nice idea in principle, but is it realistic? You see, I personally am not convinced by that. However, it's not about me, it's about you. I want to know from you, how do you interpret the King's speech? If you saw it yesterday, you may well turn around to me and say, don't be ridiculous, Phil, you can't talk about this for 3 hours. I never watched the King's speech, I'm not in the least bit interested. If that's the case, I want to hear from you as well, because maybe you don't hang on our monarch's words, and it's perfectly justified if you don't. If you choose not to do so, tell me why not. But what did you make of the King's speech? 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Do get in touch, because I really want to hear from you this morning. And that number is absolutely the number to make a note of, because there's several ways you can get in touch with us. Apart from phoning us, you can also send us a WhatsApp message to that very same number, 0344 499 1000, and you can also send a voice note to that number if you so wish. So maybe you're a bit nervous at the idea of going on air and speaking live, and I understand it. I mean, believe me, I'm here and I'm nervous. No, I'm joking, I'm fine. I don't know what I'm nervous for, I know what's coming up. But if perhaps you are a bit nervous and you want to have a few words, but you don't necessarily want to go live, that's totally fine. 0344 499 1000. Send us a voice note if you will. The only thing I'd ask is maybe just keep it under a minute, because this show's only 3 hours and, you know, we don't really have the time to listen to several long messages. But that is the telephone number. It is also worth noting the text number 87222. Make sure you start your message with the word talk if you want to send a more traditional SMS. And if you want to tweet us, you can. Now, some of you may remember the last time I was on Talk that I had Twitter. I have now got rid of that, so please don't try and tweet me directly. I don't use Twitter anymore. I'll explain that in just a second. But if you tweet at talkTV, I will still get the chance to see it. So that's the way you can get in touch. Loads of ways, absolutely no excuse, and I very much look forward to speaking with you later. It's very simple here at Talk. Your opinion matters, and I would love to hear your opinion on what you made of His Majesty's speech yesterday, if indeed you did watch it. If you didn't, why not? Why don't you care what the King has to say? 0344 499 1000. Now, just going to review some of the top stories that we are seeing from the papers today, because I know that Johnny went through the front pages, but in particular there are stories that I want to actually talk to you about. And one in particular here is about this potential new mansion tax that is being spoken about and potentially could be introduced under Labour. This new mansion tax plan, the UK government is preparing this high-value property tax which will target homes worth over £2 million. And apparently the extra annual council surge could come into force from 2028, and it could be anything from an additional £2,500 to £7,500 depending on the valuation. Now, the valuation itself is what bothers me terribly, because if you actually go into the nitty-gritty of how they're going to do these valuations, I personally believe this to be incredibly disturbing, because the actual method of the valuations is going to be through an automated digital model. So rather than physical inspections, you would expect someone to actually sort of go to someone's house and look at the property and inspect it and value it with a human eye. We're actually talking about potentially AI or just an automated model kicking in to actually determine the value of someone's home, which I find absolutely outrageous, because property professionals have said that the automated approach itself may inaccurately or even unfairly value a property to a higher value. In fact, anything up to the tune of, would you believe, a potential additional £30,000. Now, if that's the case, and your council tax is based on your home's valuation, you're talking about a situation where potentially people will end up paying more council tax purely on the say-so of a computer. And I think that's absolutely outrageous. As much as I understand we have technology now that is perfectly clever, arguably even more clever than some humans, I understand that completely. But if you're going to rely on technology to value and do the work of a human being, well then surely that is going to be perilous when you consider that potentially thousands of extra pounds are at stake. Because I don't know about you, I don't have surplus thousands of pounds. Don't get me wrong, I don't live in a £2 million property for starters, so I probably don't have too much to worry about. But my point being is that I certainly don't have surplus money lying around, and I'm fairly sure it's the case with quite a lot of people. So what do you make of that? 0344 499 1000. You can talk about any of the stories that we're talking about today, even though I mentioned that obviously I want to get your opinion on the King's speech yesterday and what you made of it. And we'll go into that in just a second. But I'm always interested in hearing whatever you've got to say on any of the topics that we are covering. But I do want to start off with the King's speech. In particular, I want to know what you made of it. And as far as I'm concerned, I sort of look at it as very interesting choice of wording. I wanted to pick up on one point, and I'm going to speak to Georgina in London in just a second. But there was one point that I really picked up on that I actually thought stood out a mile, given what His Majesty was talking about. Now, in particular, His Majesty spoke about the difference between right and wrong rather than good and evil. Right? Now, if you didn't see or hear the whole speech, you might not know what I'm referring to, but he used the opportunity to say that he hopes that right will, if you like, come out on top over wrong rather than good from evil. And I thought that was very specific wording, because typically, in a more cliche fashion, people would say, we hope that good triumphs over evil, right? But in this instance, His Majesty said right over wrong. And I thought that was an interesting choice of words, because I might be completely misreading this. It may be just a very simple case of that he decided that that was going to be the way he'd say it. But I thought that because good and evil is so subjective, it was almost like he was worried about the idea of offending someone for suggesting that their views might be evil. Does that make sense? So in other words, he probably didn't want to run the risk of upsetting any individuals who might believe in something that most level-headed people might turn around and say, well, that's just pure evil. But then because that's their cultural belief, they might say, well, how dare you say that about us? Are you picking on us? I don't know. I could be completely wrong. 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think. I will come to your calls in just a moment's time. But anyway, so that was one choice of words. I also thought that he sort of had to get quite a few of the old proverbial boxes ticked, if I'm honest, because if you have a look at all of the different communities and the different items featured in a very short broadcast. The King's speech, don't forget, is only 10 minutes, and that includes any musical interludes as well. So realistically, His Majesty's speech is only really about 3 or 4 minutes in the grand scheme of things. But in that time, he managed to make reference to so many different aspects of modern British life that it almost felt like tradition was eroded away. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. Georgina in London, a very good morning to you. What did you make of His Majesty's speech yesterday? And is it too late to say Merry Christmas to you for yesterday?
Well, Merry Christmas to you, Phil.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
I do respect the royal family, but I do think that it must be difficult for them to actually understand the problems that the British population are facing at the present time. You know, the royal family are so far removed from reality. They don't have to endure the hardships that the real people face on a daily basis. The very fact that the King was once again talking about the benefits of diversity, when diversity, in my opinion, is the Achilles heel of our now broken society. The late Queen, when she used to give her speeches, did inject some of her own personal feelings about the year that she'd had into her speech. For instance, when she spoke of her annus horribilis, after the shocking year she'd had after the separation of Charles and Diana and the awful fire that happened at Windsor. I thought that King Charles's speech was a little hollow. I mean, we know we've had problems with Andrew over the last few years, and he could have mentioned that every family has their own problems and must be dealt with. But sadly...
Where do you think that hollowness came from, Georgina? And like I said, in what way did you think it was? Because I'm not disagreeing with you. I just wondered what your interpretation was.
I think the hollowness comes from his lack of actually experiencing the problems that real normal people have. There's a hollowness there because you've got to have lived that life to actually be able to empathise. And I thought it would have been nice if his speech could have included compassion.
But do you think it's beyond the realms of possibility that just because someone lives what one might call privileged lifestyle, and look, of course, I wouldn't want the king or any of the royal family to live any other way, to be honest, because otherwise what on earth's the point of them being a royal family if they don't live some sort of different life to us mere subjects? But
I agree.
Sorry, I was just Georgina. But my point being, is that is it beyond the realms of possibility that maybe he is aware, he just might not have gone through what a lot of people go through with, say, cost of living and things like that, but it's not that he doesn't know it's happening, right?
Well, you know, they only go by what they are told, what they see on the television, and what they read in the newspapers. Personally, I've always believed that you believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. It's your actual experience of the subject matter that gives you the inside depth of what's really happening. And until you've actually been out there and experienced that, you can't stand and give a speech on a subject that really you don't have any experience of. And that, for me, I find very difficult. You know, if you, say, wanted to give a speech on mathematics, you would have had to go and you would have had to study mathematics before you were able to give a speech. So how can somebody stand at the front of the country and give a speech on how they should live their life when they have never lived that life? They've always had a privileged life, and that's why I'm saying.
But Georgina, but by that reckoning, then we'd never speak to anyone probably here on Talk, because a lot of our people our audience who phone in, all they do is they offer us their opinion, and believe me, opinion matters, okay, and opinion matters certainly on Talk. But is there anything wrong with someone offering an opinion, even if they haven't necessarily sort of gone through that experience? So, for example, I'm no academic when it comes to mathematics, but I can certainly sort of talk about it from my viewpoint. Do you see what I mean? So I can't give a speech about it, but I could certainly talk about it.
Well, whether, you know, to be honest, it's a democratic society, and we are all entitled to our own opinions. Whatever your opinion may be, you are entitled to that, or we used to be, let's put it that way.
You are indeed. Georgina, I tell you what, we're going to leave it there for no other reason than just I want to get to as many calls as possible. I really appreciate you calling in. Thank you so much for kicking off the conversation. Georgina in London there. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. What did you make of the King's speech yesterday? How do you interpret it? What did you take away from it? And even if you never watched it at all, it doesn't matter. Tell me why. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, where your opinion matters. Stay with us.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for the pleasure of your company. We're talking this morning about His Majesty's speech yesterday, because if you didn't see it, basically the King decided to use his address for the festive season to call for unity and to unite different communities. But some of the wording that was used and some of the imagery that was shown, I think, was all very carefully crafted to almost, if you like, give an impression of being political without being political. And it's just something that I don't think we ever would have seen from Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And so I wondered, based on, I know this is obviously, I think this is the third, is it the third or is it the fourth speech now we've seen from the King? It must be, I think it's the fourth, yeah. I think it's the fourth as well. So so given that it's like the third or fourth speech that we've seen from the King around Christmas time now, I just wondered how you interpreted it and what you made of it. Anyway, let's have a little listen to a voice note. You can also join in this as well, by the way. If you want to send a voice note, it's the same number. It's 0344 499 1000. Just send your voice note. Try and keep it under a minute if you can, please. And it comes to us via WhatsApp. Let's have a listen to this one from Marty.
When I was a little girl, I grew up opposite three Jewish ladies, and on the corner was the hairdressers owned by a Jewish lady, and you couldn't wish to meet better people. Down the road, four from our house, was a Jewish couple, and they were so welcoming, friendly. Nobody could have asked for more from them. I've got no problem with anyone, Jewish, Asian, Muslim, British. We're all the same. We've all got the same skeletal system. We've all got the same muscle system. We've all got the same colour blood. We should all just get on. These terrorists and people who want to kill us, they're not welcome here. But I'd welcome Jewish people with open arms. Have a good time in the new year at Talk Radio. Thank you. Bye. Karen from Swaddling Coat.
Thank you very much indeed for that voice note there, much appreciated. Yeah, look, do you know what? I couldn't agree more, and I'm fairly sure you'll find that most people listening would agree with that as well. A human is a human, right? If you've got blood running through you, and I think you said they've got the same muscle system or the same nervous system, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. But what matters is when people start trying to inflict those views on other people. That's where it goes horribly wrong. That's what troubles me. And as much as I understand what the King was trying to get at, where he calls for unity and tries to encourage communities to come together, at the end of the day, you can't encourage a community to merge with another community if an individual from said community doesn't want to do that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean the whole community is not up for the idea, but if an individual says, I'm not going to speak to my neighbour because of their religion, because of their colour, because of their creed, whatever it may be, whatever disgusting reason it might be, you can't make someone do that. And that's where I think the problem lies. And until our leaders recognise that that is a fundamental cause of the lack of unity in this country, we might just be in trouble. Let's get a couple of calls going, shall we? Ken, I believe, is in Sunderland. Ken, a very good morning to you. A Merry Christmas for yesterday. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Phil. Compliments of the season to you. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, OK, yes, so Ken, tell us, what was it about the King's speech yesterday? First of all, did you watch it?
Yes, I did.
And what did you take away from it? Because I'm intrigued. I wondered if it was just me who was maybe reading too much into it.
Well, first of all, I am a royalist. I quite admire the King, love the Queen, so no problem there. But I did closely listen to the King's speech and try to dissect what he was saying behind it. And I just came to some conclusions that maybe your viewers, your listeners could debate. Can anyone name another country on the planet Earth where its people are all multicultural, diverse, differently educated, differently brought up, have different values? Is there anywhere anyone can think of other than our country where an experiment in multiculturalism is being carried out to the detriment of the indigenous population? Secondly, I'm a well-travelled man, and I've been to many, many countries and always respected where I am and obey all the laws that are current in that country. Yet it isn't being applied to people who enter legally or even illegally into this country.
Yeah, Ken, do you know, I find it very. You're all speaking a lot of good sense this morning. So thank you very much indeed. I can't argue with that at all, and that's why I suppose that from His Majesty's speech yesterday, when he called for that unity, that I had a bit of an issue with it, because it almost implies that the pressure on the onus, if you like, is on us, the great British public, to unite, when actually I would argue the onus should be on those who want to come and live in the UK to unite with Britain. In other words, it's not the British people who should have to adapt to people who maybe have moved over here and have many recent years. It should be those who've moved over here and have many years to adapt to a British way of life. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's quite correct. Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah. Ken, thank you so much indeed for your call. The only reason I move on, it's really a treat to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Please do call again. I just want to squeeze one more call in before the half-past break. So let's go to Steve in Leeds. Steve, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are well as well. Now, Steve, what would you like to make about the King's speech? What did you want to say?
Well, I listened to the King's speech, and I'm a royalist, and I think the King has broken his social contract with his subjects. And I'll tell you why very quickly. The King is head of the Church of England, defender of the faith, head of the armed forces, and the biggest defender, supposedly, of our cultural values and history. That's what the monarchy was there for. When he goes abroad, he takes British cultural values with him as a shield to say to the world, look how wonderful Britain is, because our values are much better than other people's. In that speech, he never once mentioned the fact that we're cancelling Christmas, never once mentioned the soldiers that fight in his name that are living on the streets, and never once mentioned defending our culture and our history. He just sat there like a big woke guy and said, yeah, bring it on, let's change Britain. He's supposed to defend this nation and its history and its culture. That's his sole role in life. That's what we pay him for. That's why we have the palaces and all the pomp and ceremony, to remind people of our history and how great it was. And he sits there and goes, oh, let's have diversity. Really? Yeah? The empire wasn't built on diversity. It was built on a shared collection of social values that we spread across the world. Yeah. But he's not even defending it.
No, Steve, you're absolutely right. I mean, I would say one thing. I also happen to be much of a royalist. I do normally respect the royal family. I know there are some people who say, you know, how can you do that? They're all privileged and all that malarkey. I almost understand that argument, but I don't buy into it. So I think there's the difference. But one thing that you picked up on there, which is really important, and I actually might come back to you later, and Steve, by the way, thank you so much for your call. I'm really sorry, just again, moving on for time reasons only, but thank you very much indeed. One thing that you picked up on there that I'd love to explore as well, if anyone wants to get involved in this conversation this morning, is the erosion of Christmas, is what Steve said. He was speaking about how Christmas is being eroded. And I personally think that sort of from what I've seen this year, and actually from the last couple of years, that what we have seen and what we've known and what we've loved about Christmas time has changed dramatically. I'll go into more details in a bit, but if you want to get involved in that as a conversation as well, you're most welcome to do so. Or indeed, if you want to say what you thought about the King's speech yesterday. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. This is Talk, where your opinion matters. After the break, we are going to be speaking to Kevin Mountford, who's a finance and savings expert and co-founder of Raisin UK, and we're going to speak in particular about Boxing Day sales, and we're also going to read some of your messages and take more of your calls. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It's just gone 10:30 on Boxing Day morning. This is Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on Talk. Thank you so much indeed for choosing us as your Boxing Day company. And coming up in just a moment, we're going to be talking about Boxing Day sales. But I've got some messages that have come in about the King's speech, in particular what His Majesty said yesterday and what you make of it. And this is the interpretation from Sean in Gloucester, who has said, good morning and Merry Christmas, Phil, and the same to you, Sean, as well. We are now seeing the catastrophic results of being ruled by the left. It started with Blair and is now supercharged under, he describes him as Keith Starlin. Crazy bacon munch, what's it, bacon muncher Milprey, I see, like Ed Miliband, obviously, and Lammy and thieves and all of those, and as for the hypocrite Sadiq Khan as well. The Tories were no better, which is why we need a clean slate and reform in charge. The Uni Party have led us to where we are now and are fully to blame for anti-Semitic behaviour. I must say, though, I fear that too much damage has been done for our nation, and it's a massive undertaking to turn it around. If we don't, we are lost. Sean in Gloucester, thank you very much indeed for that. And actually, just to pick up on one or two things that you said there, I completely and utterly agree with you as far as the damage that has been done to our great nation, our once great nation. But let me be really clear on something. I don't believe it's too late. Truly, I don't. I think it takes backbone. I think it will require a government to come in and to recognise where the country has gone so wrong, to not worry about causing offence to people who don't appreciate British values, and to say if you don't like it, you don't have to stay in Britain. That's simple as. That's really what we need to say. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Send a WhatsApp, get in touch on the phone on that number, and you can also send a voice note. Keep it under a minute if you will. If you want to send a more conventional SMS message, then it's 87222. Make sure you start your message with the word talk. OK, now let's move on and talk about Boxing Day sales, because UK Boxing Day sales are actually projected to fall by about £1 billion this year, dropping from around 4.6 billion in 24 to roughly 3.6 billion in 2025. What is going on with our high streets? Where have those dramatic figures come from? Let's talk about this with Kevin Mountford, who's a finance and savings expert and co-founder of Raisin UK. Kevin, a very good morning to you, and Merry Christmas for yesterday. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Good morning to you, and equally Merry Christmas to you, Phil.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, OK, so Kevin, I mean, this makes quite grim reading. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I think I've got a rough idea, but you are the expert. So what on earth has gone wrong with our shopping habits?
Well, these predictions are coming from Barclays, and Barclays account for something like 50% of the transactions through credit and debit card payments. So I think there's a number of reasons. I mean, if you look at the headlines, we've seen inflation drop slightly. As a consequence of that, it's enabled the Bank of England to reduce interest rates, so borrowing should be cheaper. But I think we've still got a real problem with cost of living. And as you say, if expenditure's down, because the Boxing Day sales is one of the biggest periods for retail spend, and obviously the retailers themselves will really be suffering if that expenditure's gone down. But I think bottom line is there's two reasons. One is, as I say, cost of living. I don't think people have necessarily got the discretionary spend that they would have done. There's maybe a fear factor that some of these increased costs of living could get worse. But on the other hand, there's also some kind of insights that come out of this research to say we may be reassessing our values. People thinking, you know what, I'm going to spend more quality time with my family. And I think that's also playing a part. So it's a period of, as I say, reassessing what's available to spend, getting the priorities right, and maybe, as I say, thinking about spending more time with friends and family.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels to me like the most obvious analysis, and this is certainly my feeling as well, is that unfortunately people just don't have the kind of surplus income that they once did. And I'm not going to pretend that many people in this country were ever multimillionaires. I know there's a handful who are, but let's look at your average everyday person, of which I absolutely include myself in that. I haven't even thought twice about going to Boxing Day sales today, not least of all because of working, but actually because the truth is I kind of can't afford to do so. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, and I think that is fairly typical, particularly, again, if we look at the outcome of the recent budget, etc. There's a fear factor in I guess, kind of middle class. So effectively they feel as though they're being kind of attacked from government decisions. Obviously, the more wealthy individuals, they'll look and continue to spend as maybe they would have done. But I think the audience now is being squeezed in terms of those that have got the available income to spend. But going back to the earlier point, the worrying factor is for the retail sector, and I think the hospitality sector, and bear in mind, they're still reeling from costs in minimum wage, cost in national insurance, etc. This is a really important period, and if those entities do not get a good kind of Christmas period, then there'll be consequences as we come into the new year. I also think that people are a bit more conscious of borrowing money to spend at this time of year as well. So as opposed to going into credit and then having to suffer about repaying that for months into the next year, I think maybe people are taking a bit more considered approach to it as well.
You mentioned consequences there. What kind of consequences do you think there will be for the retail sector and indeed hospitality? Let's focus on retail just for the moment.
Well, I mean, we're seeing now that unemployment's increasing. So subsequently, if the industry is not getting the revenue it wanted, there could well be more closures on the high street. I mean, in this day and age, we are certainly researching online. A lot of people buy online, but going back to the research that we're referring to, it did say that a lot of people that are going out to spend do intend to go into the high street and actually go into physical shops, which is great news. But as I say, if that expenditure isn't happening to the level that the industry would require, then there could well be, as I say, close signs going up, jobs at risk, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the high street, but I love the high street in the way it used to be, not so much now, because my biggest problem is, and this might be a bit high streetist to some people, but every single high street you go to all appear to look the same as the one before. So therefore I have an expectation of what I'm going to see in those shops, and frankly I just don't bother going into them because I've already got in my mind what is already there in the first place. So why would I step foot into a shop if I know what the product's going to be. Whereas actually in years gone by, when high streets had more of a unique identity, there was more of an element of wonder about it. You'd go into a shop, say, "Oh, what does this have in store for us?" Do you see what I mean? And I actually think that that's part of the problem. And I blame a lot of that on, and I speak, by the way, as a son of a landlord, but I think that boils down to a lot of greedy individuals who are trying to max out on the amount of money that they can get from those properties. And I don't blame them for doing it, but what I do blame is successive governments not capping it appropriately to be able to ensure businesses have a fighting chance, and independent businesses at that.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Chester, and when I first moved here, the streets were littered with bespoke boutique type independents, and they got squeezed out, whether it's because of rent, whether it's because of rates, etc. And it just feels that there isn't a real kind of strategy in a lot of town centres. And subsequently, as you say, most of them are looking very samey, so they're dominated by retail brands, etc., national retail brands. So I think it is a shame. There may be one or two exceptions, but generally speaking, as you say, each one looks the same. So why bother, effectively?
Yeah, totally honestly. And you mentioned also about the hospitality sector as well. Let's talk a bit about that, because I have a major concern for the hospitality sector. I am just putting it out there without wanting to sound like I've got issues. I love the pub, okay? Absolutely blooming love the pub. And I can't get my head around the fact that successive governments, again, have had such a disregard for the value of a public house and just allowed them to diminish before our eyes. You know, at one stage, I believe it was as many as one pub a day in the UK is closing. It might even still be that. What is going on? Why can't we get our heads around the fact that we need the hospitality industry?
Yeah, and you could argue that, you know, the current government's not really that interested in, you know, that kind of environment, because they're not looking at people that regularly go out and either for food, drink, etc. So whilst I say I live outside of Chester, I live in a village, and the village pub that we have here is so important to the community. So effectively, people do go and meet and socialise, etc. But we know that sector has suffered for years, and it becomes a real challenge for those that run those businesses. And again, particularly the individuals. We're not talking about national chains here, but I totally agree. I think they are so critical to the community aspect, never mind the fact that, you know, in this day and age, we want opportunities to go and enjoy ourselves. But I think, yes, it's going to be a real struggle, particularly, again, as we get into, you know, the Q1 in 2026, when often people are thinking about, you know, dry January and so on and so forth. So this is a real peak period.
Started on dry January. What a load of virtue signaling nonsense, for goodness sake.
Totally agree.
But do you know, the astute team behind the glass have just done a search. They've said 378 pubs closed in 2025, so that's just over one a day. I think that is so unbelievably sad. I hate that. Really, really horrible. And again, it's always the independents. It's the small ones that are suffering. You know, the chains, they're relatively okay. And don't get me wrong, I know chains have got a place. I understand that, because they obviously generate more income, more jobs as well. So I understand completely that there is a need for chain brands completely, but it should never be to the detriment of independence.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I think the character that those independent kind of venues provide is again, you know, it adds that kind of bespoke element to it that makes it a lot more enjoyable environment than going into something that just looks the same as the next town.
Yeah, totally and utterly. Kevin Mountford, finance and savings expert and also co-founder of Raisin UK. Thank you so much for joining us on Boxing Day morning. I really, really appreciate your time and your wisdom this morning and giving us an insight into what is going on. And if you, of course, want to join in that conversation or any of the conversations, you know what you need to do. Telephone number is 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch, because your opinion really does matter. This is Talk.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk at Christmas, it is indeed. This is Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for the pleasure of your company. Taking your calls this morning on a number of subjects. In particular, I'm asking you, what did you make of His Majesty's speech yesterday? What did you interpret from it? What did you take away from it? And what did you make of the wording? I thought it was very cleverly and very crafty wording. So I want to know how you interpret that. We will, I promise you, we'll play a clip from the King's Speech in just a bit if you haven't heard it already. But we're also talking this morning about Boxing Day sales, talking just now about the projected fall in revenue from Boxing Day sales. And Stephen in Manchester has given us a call to talk about that particular subject. So Stephen, a very good morning to you. Merry Christmas for yesterday. How are you?
Oh, Merry Christmas to you. I wanted to talk to you today about digital exclusion. This relates to the high street and even accessing or getting to the high street. I'll give you some examples. Pubs that don't take cash, Starbucks cafes that don't take cash, in Cheadle High Street near Stockport, for instance, the Starbucks cafe there, they don't take cash. It's very thinly populated. The one across the road, the Costa Coffee, is full. I spoke to them about this because I belong to a civic society, Manchester Civic Society, who have had a big campaign on cash. And Costa say, oh yes, we take cash and we get all the older people. At the digital access NCP car parks, you can't access the stations. If you go to Stockport Station, as an example, speaking to a neighbour, he was going into Manchester, couldn't go. Got down to the car park, the main drag car park as you go straight down to the station off the A6. It's app only.
Yeah, and Stephen, actually that extends to parking on the high street now, doesn't it? The number of the ticket machines, I mean, the parking meters sadly are long gone, but the actual ticket machines that one used to go and put the coins in to get the paper ticket out to put and display in the car, a lot of councils have got rid of them. They don't want to maintain them anymore. They've all gone to the app only.
And, fortunately, Stockport's seen sense here and they've kept putting, and it's vital that they do. I mean, there are extended arguments around this. We don't want to become cashless because we all become sort of corporate and government bond slaves in the long term.
Well, I was going to say, it's basically handing over control of our money to the authorities. No thanks. That's my money. I'll control it how I want to.
Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, it's cash gravity. So there's a pub in Stockport again that are going, and I noticed she'd gone cash only. I said, oh, well, what's that about? And she said, oh, well, she said, we get a group of builders in and every afternoon. And there they are, racking up debts. The wives came in and complained. One of them had printed off the debts. And we're not letting them come in here if you carry on with this card business. And she's gone back to cash because you can see it in your hand. There's moderation in your spending. There's all sorts of issues. But the one that particularly I'm ringing about today is access, and whether it's going to, like, Manchester United or Stockport County, they're cashless. I know people who don't go to either because they can't access, because they just don't have that mentality of using.
I tell you who also really suffers for cashless, and I think they're starting to get a grip on it now, but it really has taken quite a while. People such as those who are homeless, who rely on people throwing loose change at them just to be able to get enough food to last the day. There are people such as charities, you know, I mean, people rather crassly refer to them as chuggers, so these are the people who are the ones who stand on the streets and ask people to sign up to something and then ultimately potentially give money, maybe like a donation on a monthly basis or something like that, to a particular cause. They're all struggling as well because they might have the donation buckets and of course they can't do anything with those, but now of course they've started to take contactless payments. But it's just
many implications.
Totally and utterly. And one thing that, sorry, just Stephen, but one thing that you mentioned that I'm really interested in, which I completely and utterly agree with, is this inability to monitor spending. Because if you actually have a wad of notes and that is your budget for, say, a week or something like that, you can then physically see how much money you have left to spend. Whereas if people just tap it on a card and they don't check their statement every single day, they could be plunging themselves into debt without realising.
A lot of debt with this. And I would finish by saying to you that there is this organisation called the Payment Choice Alliance, who are very operative, who've sat down with an all-party parliamentary committee on this now. And remember, France, even Norway, the Netherlands, Spain, New York, various places around the globe are very, they've mandated cash and said you can't do this anymore. We've asked Andy Burnham's economic team to look at this, at least with a view to local legislation. We urgently need, for the high street and other reasons and everybody's convenience, to mandate cash and protect cash.
Well, I completely and utterly agree with you, Stephen, because I think cash is super important. And I must admit that as much as for convenience sake I do often pay with card personally, it's not because I'm not very aware of cash, and indeed I try and sort of have a fallback just in case I need it. But you never know, though. One day it may be the case that somehow, somewhere, that card machines all over the world, we've seen it before, struggle to take payments, and as a result of it, if you don't have cash to fall back on, you're in big trouble. Let's be honest. Stephen in Manchester, thank you very much indeed for your call. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. You can also join in as well. That's exactly what Lenny in Ashford has done. Lenny in Kent, I should say to those who are listening in a wider audience. And Lenny, I very much hope you're tickety-boo. How are you this morning?
I am tickety-boo.
Excellent.
Yeah, everything's all right, all okay.
Marvellous stuff.
Well,
Lenny, I hope you had a very good Christmas yesterday. What would you like to say about the King's speech?
Well, it's more proof that he's not living in reality.
Oh.
And I think he should look at, he's got the same attitude as Marie Antoinette.
Right.
And he doesn't realise the life that his subjects are leading.
But do you? But okay, so I take a little bit of umbrage because I agree to some degree with what you're saying, and I've heard someone else say this earlier on this hour as well, that he can't possibly know what life or what we're all going through. I believe you're right. He can't relate to it because he hasn't gone through it, but it doesn't mean he's not aware of it, does it?
Well, if he's aware of it, he should be ashamed of himself. Because if he wanted to find out what his subjects are, the life that we are leaving, it's written in a majority of papers. And it's on the radio continually. His subjects are really struggling with life. And this diversity, that is making his subjects second-class citizens. And he doesn't know what. Well,
compared to royalty, we are, aren't we? We can't possibly be expected. Compared to royalty, we are second class. We can't possibly be expected to be on a par with the royalty, can we?
Well, I have been a royalist all my life, but just lately I have become a Republican because I think he has speeded up the demise of the royal family. And it's on a very, very tricky road.
Well, I tell you what, Lenny, stay there, right there for 2 seconds. I tell you why, because just in case, I've been teasing this all morning, but just in case you didn't get the chance to hear or watch the King's speech yesterday, let's just take a moment to remind ourselves of what His Majesty said. Have a listen to this.
In this, with the great diversity of our communities, we can find the strength to ensure that right triumphs over wrong.
Yeah, so you see, it's very interesting wording there, Lenny, because, I mean, there are several things in that. Obviously, highlighting diversity, because he's obviously talking about different communities trying to come together in the broader speech that he's saying. But the other thing was when he says about right triumphing over wrong. And I didn't understand why he didn't say good over evil, which, of course, is the more familiar expression. I thought the wording was very curious.
Well, how can he say, how can he justify what he's saying when we're living in a powder keg? And I will tell you why diversity will never ever work and why multicultural will never work. If a dog is born in a stable, does it become a horse?
Well, I don't believe so.
Yeah, no.
I get the analogy.
And that is the difference. That's the same difference, say, between Christianity and Islam. There is such a big difference, you cannot make the two match up.
Well, actually, Lenny, I tell you what, I'm going to move on just for time reasons, but I do have to say, there's actually one thing I need to highlight, I need to pick up on there. You say there's such a massive difference. I actually fundamentally agree. If you break down all of the Abrahamic faiths, they're all born out of the same text. So actually, the differences aren't as great as some people believe them to be. Have we got time for a very quick voice note, do we think, from Michael? Because he's only got a short. So we have listen to what Michael said. He sent a voice note to 0344 499 1000. Let's hear what Michael has to say.
Hello, Phil. It's Michael from Norwich. I'd like to thank Talk Radio and all the people that call in for keeping me sane this year. Now, regarding the King's speech, the King of Woke, I call him, I thought that the King's speech was written by the present government. So maybe it was written by Starmer the Harmer. Could you check this out, please, or am I wrong?
Well, it was written technically by the Prime Minister's office, so you're not completely wrong there, Michael. But I do think it really pushed the boundaries without getting as political as probably otherwise it could do. Look, there's loads more still to come. Thank you, by the way, for that, Michael, and do keep those voice notes coming in, 0344 499 1000. There's loads more still to discuss in the next couple of hours, so I really want you to have your say and get involved in the conversation. Let me know what you think. Coming up in just a moment, we'll be speaking to Sebastian Salek, who's a Labour councillor and commentator. He'll be going through the day's top stories with us, so make sure you stay tuned to us. This is Talk.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock on Boxing Day morning. I hope you are well. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas day yesterday. And now you just get the chance to breathe, a little sigh of relief, and take it a bit easier today. Or maybe you're going to go totally bonkers and enjoy all the merriment that this time of year brings with you. Who knows? This is Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on Talk. We've got loads still to come in the next couple of hours. I really hope that you will stick with us for the duration. Going to be speaking in just a moment's time to Sebastian Selleck, who of course was Labour councillor and commentator, and then later we'll be getting all of the latest royal news as well from royal biographer Angela Levin. She'll be here to tell us about what she made of the King's speech yesterday, what we can take away from it, and of course the latest from Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew. All of that and so much more, plus your calls and your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. And in particular, let's focus on the King's speech. That's what I want to get from you this morning, is what did you make of the King's speech? You heard what His Majesty had to say yesterday, and amongst you might have heard it, you might not have heard it. If you didn't hear it, I'd like to know why not. Maybe you're not in the least bit interested what our monarch has to say, and that's perfectly valid as well. 0344 499 1000, and tell me why that is the case. But certainly what I took away from it was the undercurrent, if you like, of just being on the right side of apolitical, but only just. And there are some who would interpret it completely differently. Are you one of them? Did you think maybe it was a bit too political for your liking? Certainly could never have imagined Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II have even contemplating introducing the idea of politics into her speech at Christmas time. And I wonder whether or not if you thought the same about King Charles's efforts yesterday. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number to get involved with if you would like to have a conversation on the good old dog and bone, but also if you would like to send a WhatsApp message as well as a voice note. If you do want to send a voice notes, very simple. Try and keep them under a minute if you can, please, but you send them to that number as well through WhatsApp and we will get them here at the studio. And if you want to send a good old-fashioned text message, it's 87222. We're going to speak to Sebastian in just a moment. I just want to read through some of the messages because I'm aware I've neglected them in the first hour, so I'm very sorry about that. Jessica says, hello Phil, I didn't watch the King's speech because I was worried about what I might hear, and from what you and Johnny, he's referring to Johnny Gould from breakfast this morning, what you and Johnny have said, it seems I made the right decision. Jess in Dover, thank you very much indeed for that. This one comes from Sharon in Staffordshire. Good morning, Phil. Merry Boxing Day. Is that a thing? Merry Boxing Day? I guess so, it is now. Merry Boxing Day to you as well, Sharon. How can our king talk about religion? I would never listen to his speech. Never. How can we have this man ruling our country. I have no respect for him, and I never would listen to anything he has to say if it is of no interest to me. Sharon, thank you very much indeed for that. And that's exactly my point, is that if you didn't listen to it, you're most welcome to tell me why you didn't listen to it. I personally think the King's speech, or indeed the late Queen's speech, is a very unique and very special moment of the year. And the reason why I think that is, think about it. You're not terribly likely to have the monarch of our great nation in our living rooms, are we? You know, unless for a very specific cause. And as a result of it, it's like the nearest I'm ever going to get to standing face to face with royalty, in particular with the King. And I think there's something pretty incredible on Christmas Day to be, for want of a better term, that up close and personal with royalty. Now, I know full well he can't see me and I'm watching him on a screen. I get it completely. But there is something about knowing that the monarch is on your television or maybe on your radio that just feels a bit wow, isn't there? Or maybe not. Maybe you'll tell me otherwise. 0344 499 1000. This one, final message before we get to Sebastian. Kath in Cardiff. Catherine in Cardiff says, "Talk, what a treat to turn on the radio this morning to hear the dulcet tones of Phil Dave." Well, that's very kind of you to say so, Kath, and no, I did not ask her to say that. A man of principle who never minces his words, no matter what the subject. Great to have him out from behind the glass expressing the views of so many of us. Thanks, Phil. Catherine, I have to thank you. That's easily one of the best things that someone who's not related to me has ever said about my career, so thank you very much indeed for that. Right, let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about some of the top stories that are making the headlines today. There are plenty of stories to digest in the papers, and we're going to do that in the company right now of Sebastian Salak, who of course is Labour councillor and commentator. Sebastian, a very happy Boxing Day to you. Good morning.
Happy Boxing Day. Merry Boxing Day.
Merry Boxing Day. Let's go with Merry Boxing Day, shall we? Quite right. Look, I tell you what, first of all, Sebastian, I trust you had a very good Christmas yesterday.
It was lovely, thank you. Hope you did too.
Yes, thank you. Very pleasant indeed. Right, now we've got the niceties out the way, let's get into some disagreements, shall we? Thousands more to be hit by mansion tax amid overvaluation fears. So this is the new mansion tax plan. The UK government preparing to do sort of high-value property tax targeting homes worth over £2 million with an extra annual council tax surcharge from 2028. And it could be anything ranging from £2,500 to £7,500 plus on top of what you're already paying based on the valuation of the property. I personally think this is just the politics of envy. It's abhorrent. What do you say?
I think it's the politics of fairness, Phil, and I think it's the stream that runs through so much of what this government does. It's about looking at who has a little bit more, who is in the position to be able to contribute. We are economically in a horrible situation, aren't we? We have been for so many years.
And whose fault's that?
Well, I would say it's largely to do with many shock events. It's the financial crisis, it's COVID, it's Brexit. I think the Tories probably could have handled it a little bit better during their 14 years opportunity to turn it round. But the point is, it puts us in a position where we have to look and say, who can help out? And I think if you live in a house that's worth £2 million or more, which very, very few of us do, I certainly don't, I think many of your listeners and viewers won't as well, you are in a position to be able to contribute a few £1,000s more a year, which adds up, and that can go to vital services that we all value.
How do you know that they're in a position to contribute a few £1,000s more a year? Because I certainly don't know anyone who's got surplus money at the moment, regardless of whatever their house is. Because don't forget, with bigger houses come bigger bills. I think people forget that.
Oh, of course, and that's the calculation you make when you buy a house like that. If you're going to spend £2 million or more on a house, you want to make sure you can afford it. Now, look, for those who can't afford it...
But maybe they could have afforded it before the government came along and did this, right?
Sure, and if you can't afford it, there is a mechanism to pay it back when you sell your house one day, and we know that a house worth £2 million is going to be able to return that tax that has accrued on it. So I think, again, there's an element of fairness there. It's not forcing anybody to pay anything up front. They'd have that option as well if they'd rather defer it to later down the line.
But what I find extraordinary, though, is that in the terms of when it comes to the idea of fairness, is it's sometimes implied that it's unfair that someone has potentially worked hard to make themselves a better life or fashion a better life, and it's almost like this country's determined to punish those who've managed to do that. Now, I get it. I understand some people have got inherited wealth. I do appreciate that as well. But there are a lot of people out there who do work blooming hard to make sure they can afford a more luxurious lifestyle. Why should we tell people who do that that if you do it, you're going to be punished and you're going to pay more towards society, which actually could be remedied quite easily if our governments would stop mismanaging money in the first place?
See, I think the mistake is to frame paying tax as a form of punishment. I look at tax as, nobody likes to pay tax. It's money that you could be spending on yourself, you're spending on someone else. But really, that is going to important causes that benefit all of us. Look,
migrant hotels benefit all of us?
They will benefit migrants. They will benefit those who come over seeking our help, and I think it's important to offer them that. And maybe we can get into that. But look, I'm the son of immigrants. I am a big champion of aspiration. I think you should be able to go out there, work hard, earn a load of money, and spend it on something lovely like a big house. That is your reward for your hard work.
But don't you understand, though, that becomes ever more difficult if all we're going to do is tax the wealthier in society? I'm not saying that people shouldn't pay tax. Of course they should. I think that the only fair way to do it is that everyone gets taxed. But I would have it as a single rate tax across the board, regardless of income. So no tax thresholds, because otherwise you actually run the risk of, when you get to a tax threshold, that someone who earns, say, for example, I'm going to do very basic math here, and this is not the exact figure, so don't quote me, but let's just say that if someone breaches the 40% tax threshold and they, say, go over, I don't know, £60,000 for argument's sake, someone who's earning £59,000 would have more surplus income because they don't meet that tax threshold, and therefore that puts a blockade in the way to say to people, don't aspire to earn more than £60,000 because you're going to end up paying more tax and possibly even lose some income that you might have otherwise had you been earning £59,000. It makes no sense.
So that's only the case if you're at the upper band where you start to lose your personal allowance, and that's between about £100,000 and £125,000. And at that point, you're earning pretty well. If you're earning, for example, you go into the upper tax bracket at £50,000, you're only taxed that higher rate on the amount that goes into that part. So you're not losing out by being just below the bracket. You're only paying extra tax on the amount that goes over that bracket. So there is no disincentive there not to earn more. What I would say, though, is if you do adopt that kind of flat rate of tax, as some countries do, but it is very regressive. What ends up happening is that those who earn less end up paying a much higher proportion of their overall income in tax, which I would argue is unfair.
I think we can disagree on what signifies unfair and fair, but let's move on just for time reasons alone. Let's have a look at this here, this article. Poll shock for Starmer. 1 in 3 Labour voters thinks the PM should go. Sebastian, do you think the PM should go?
No, not at all. And I would really send a very strong warning to my Labour colleagues not to repeat the mistakes of the Tories, who thought that every couple of years you can throw out your Prime Minister, you can have another go, you can do a so-called reset, and then that will fix all of your problems. When what really happened, we can all see it, is that they just fumbled through and really wasted an opportunity to create some kind of economic renewal. And I really don't want us to do the same thing. What we need, what any party in government needs, is time, is 5-year blocks. They're there for a reason, to be able to affect change, because fixing the economy doesn't happen overnight. You need that long period to be able to do it, and I'm really grateful that Labour has that. They have until 28 or 29 to be able to affect change, and I hope we start to see the green shoots of that soon.
Yeah, don't we all? Right, OK, well, actually, but according to this, a new poll commissioned by The Independent shows significant dissatisfaction with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, among 2024 Labour voters. It says that 38% of people who voted Labour in 2024 said that the party would have a better chance of winning the next election with a different leader. Now, that's very different from booting him out right here, right now. Do you think there's any truth in that perhaps maybe ahead of the next general election, which at the moment stands at around 2029, do you believe that maybe Labour would stand a better chance if they got rid of Starmer by then?
I don't think so, and this is one of the biggest mistakes I see everybody in the world of Westminster making, and it's short-term thinking. If you want to make a good political decision, extend the time horizon. We don't know where we're going to be in 28 or 29. We hope that the economy will be improving. And if that is true, then Starmer will be in a very good position to go in and ask for another 5 years. But the reality is we don't know it now. So there's no point in making any kind of plot to oust anybody, because you're doing it with incomplete information, and it could end up really seriously backfiring.
Do you genuinely believe, Sebastian, sort of as you've seen the trials and the tribulations of the government over the past year and a bit that they've been in power, since July 24, do you honestly stand by every single decision they've made? Because I think it's just been a catalogue of disasters after the other and subsequent U-turns.
Well, what I think we've seen, though, is that when they do make decisions that are wrong, they are then corrected. A really good example for me is the winter fuel allowance. I think that was a very quick decision that came in. It was made in July. You know, they've been in government for less than a month. They had a lot of money to find, and they were looking for solutions. And you can see why that kind of option looked very attractive. But I do think they got the rate wrong originally. They adjusted that. Now you get the payment if you earn over £35,000. I think that's probably the right rate. It's quite an arbitrary number to set, as are all figures in the Treasury quite often. But that willingness to change course, to adjust, I think is really valuable. What you don't want is a government that is gripped by its own pride, that will stand by every decision it makes, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, purely because they don't want to change their minds. I think changing your mind is a really important thing. It's a brave thing to do, and it's often a politically costly thing to do. But in the interest of the people, which is ultimately your first obligation as a Prime Minister, I think it's the right thing to do.
Yes, but of course you and I both know it's not in the interest of the people. What they're actually doing it for is because they've seen the backlash and they're terrified of losing voters that way. And it is absolutely no coincidence that, given the postponement of the local elections that we were supposed to see in the not-so-distant future, that it's clear to me that Labour are trying to turn their fortunes around before they even contemplate doing local elections. So if you say it's in the interest of the people, I could almost buy into it if I thought there was any truth in that.
But isn't that good democracy at work? You do something.
What, postponing local elections? I think it's terrible democracy.
So I'm still talking about winter fuel payments. I'll come on to elections. But winter fuel payments, look, it's a pure mechanism of democracy. If people cry out and say they don't like something and you find a compromise, that is just good government at work. Now, let's move on to local government. What we know is that lots of council areas are going to get a new formation very soon. They're very complicated as they are. I'm a councillor and I confess I don't understand how they do it in some parts of the country. And it's going to be better for residents because it means that you have a local mayor, a metro mayor who has control over transport and other areas, and they can do things for you that you want. What that means, though, is that they're probably going to come in a couple of years' time. That's the plan. What you don't want to do is elect a load of councillors who are only going to serve for a year. Much better to say to those councils, we'll give you a choice. Would you rather spend that time on bringing these new plans in? And many of them, I'm sure, will say yes. And let's remember, only 18 of those councils out of 130 something, I think, that are up for election next year, that are giving the choice, are Labour-led councils. So any allegation that this is some kind of an electoral engineering exercise, frankly, I think if you were going to try and defy democracy and move the goalposts, you'd find a better way of doing it than this.
Well, some might disagree slightly with that, but I'm going to move on for no other reason than time, because we've got a couple more stories I really want to get your view on, not least of all this one. Labour's small boat shame revealed as bombshell charts show scale of crisis in 2025. More than 41,000 people that is, have crossed the English Channel in small boats in 2025, with just 1 week, obviously, of this year remaining. Not even that, like just less than a week now. Charts based on the Home Office figures show that in 2025 it is set to be the second highest year on record for small boat crossings. What happened to smash the gangs?
Well, I would encourage anyone watching or listening to this to have a look at those charts, because what you see is a massive flattening of the curve around September time. Remember all the headlines.
Are we back in COVID times? What do you mean flattening of the curve? Come on.
Well, there's a curve on a chart and it flattens, which means that the cumulative rate is going down. So what I'm trying to say is that the headlines, you'll remember it very well, over the summer were, this is going to be the biggest year ever for small boats crossings. And the reality is, it hasn't been the biggest.
It's the second biggest.
Well, exactly. It hasn't set a new record because the rate of asylum seekers coming in after September has dramatically slowed.
But they're supposed to smash the gangs. They're supposed to stop this. And it seems, if this is the second worst year, that doesn't look like a very good record, does it?
Well, because they've gripped the situation. The rate has massively stopped since September. We've had a deal with France, a deal with Germany, a deal with Greece. This is a diplomatic government speaking to its European neighbours, which, let's be really honest, the Tories weren't capable of doing because they trashed those relationships, and they're so important, and this is one of the reasons why. So I think if you care about solving the small boats crisis, you should also be caring about having closer relations with our European neighbours, because this is a pan-European problem and we can only solve it by working together.
Wouldn't be a problem if we brought in the Navy. Right, very quickly, let's just speak furthermore about the subject of migrants. Barracks to house migrants. The UK government plans to start housing asylum seekers in a converted army barracks in East Sussex within weeks. This is part of efforts, obviously, to reform the asylum system and reduce reliance on expensive hotel accommodation. Good plan?
I think so. I mean, look, we know what people feel about asylum hotels, and it's for that reason that the government is looking at alternatives. And I think you do have to be creative in this situation. It's not a problem we've ever faced before, and so the answers aren't pre-written. You have to invent them anew. What's disappointing, though, is seeing what really are asylum NIMBYs in the local area saying no to this. It's an army barracks, and what's most disappointing is we're hearing that from the deputy leader of the Green Party as well, who represents part of that area in local government. And I think if you're going to be a party who is welcoming towards migrants, which I support, I think we owe it to ourselves to have a fair asylum system, then you also have to be willing to house asylum seekers on your own patch. It's just part of the deal.
I think we owe it to ourselves even more to put British citizens above asylum seekers, but let's not dwell on that too much, because as we both have established, we're both the son of migrants, but the difference is I wasn't the son, and I'm sure you aren't either, by the way, son of an illegal migrant, which is a very, very great difference. But Sebastian, let me be very clear about this. The people who are objecting to this is nothing to do with saying that they object to the idea of migration. They object to the idea of the hotels and indeed barracks being used because they simply want people who have come here illegally to be deported. That is simple as. Sebastian, we must leave it there. I'm so sorry, we've completely and utterly run out of time. There was loads more I wanted to talk to you about, but I really do appreciate you taking this time on Boxing Day morning. Sebastian Selleck there, Labour councillor and commentator, joining you and me on Talk Now. Just before the break, I do want to make a very slight correction of something I said earlier, for which I do apologise. I said to you before about the government writing the King's speech. That's not quite factually accurate. The government writes the King's speech at the state opening of Parliament, but when it comes to the actual Christmas message, it is very much a case of that it's different. It depends who. So author Rudyard Kipling actually wrote the first royal festive message for King George V, but through the years it is believed that the monarch themselves writes the speech with the assistance of fellow members of the royal family and trusted advisors. So I do apologise about that. Just to correct, it's the state opening of Parliament speech that the King has written by the government, but actually the Christmas message is indeed written by the government, by the monarch themselves. Right, OK, coming up after the break, we'll get more of your messages, more of your calls. 0344 499 1000. Speaking of the King's speech, what did you make of it? What do you take away from the King's speech? And of course, you can talk about any of the subjects that we are discussing this morning. This is where your opinion matters. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Indeed, we are the home of common sense and much, much more. This is Talk. It's Phil Dave with you through until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on Boxing Day morning. Thank you so much indeed for your company. Really do appreciate it. Let's get to some of your messages now, because you've been frantically messaging in about many of the subjects, including what did you make of the King's speech? That's what I'm asking you about yesterday, because obviously we saw His Majesty's address to us, his missed subjects, on Christmas Day, broadcast live traditionally. Well, not live, but it's broadcast, if you see what I mean, pre-recorded as live at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So did you catch it? Did you watch it? What did you make of it? And what did you take away from it? That's what I want to hear from you. We'll get to some voice notes in a moment, but just let's have a look at this. A text message that comes in from Andy in Woolwich. Hi Phil, the only part of Christmas I have liked for decades now is the Queen's speech, and now unfortunately the King's speech. I thought yesterday was a disgrace. So us British have to embrace every single culture and country that comes to this country, but all these same people can come while hating our history, culture and heritage. A complete one-way street and degradation of head of state in position of this wonderful country. And a Ukrainian choir at the end, couldn't he find a British one? He goes on to say, the carol they sung, couldn't he use a traditional carol? Never again for me. And a speech his wonderful mother would have made oh, I see. Oh, never again. And a speech I assume what you mean, Andy, is that this is not the kind of speech his wonderful mother would have made. I'm also a complete royalist. Yeah, Andy, listen, I really do struggle to disagree with that, because I too am a royalist in every sense of the word. And I just don't understand what the thinking was behind that speech yesterday. To me, it just didn't strike me as a king or queen speech at all. It was more, like I said, about it was a subliminal political message without being political. It was almost said in code, and as I've said before several times throughout this show, that it felt as though the wording was almost somehow cryptic in some parts. Tracy says, I think the King forgets that this is a Christian country. The great Queen was a devout Christian. Tracy, a very valid point, actually. And do you know what? I have to say that sort of on that very subject is that I was saying to the team earlier on behind the glass before we went on air, is that I've made it no hidden secrets to both on and off air that I'm of Jewish faith. And when the King announced that he wanted to be, rather than the guardian or the keeper of the faith, he wants to be the guardian or the keeper of the faiths in the plural, I personally don't see him in that way, and I never will do. I will never see the King of this country, which, by the way, I have huge respect for the monarch, I have huge respect for the royal family, well, most of them. Let me be really clear, I will never see the King as the head of my faith, because he's simply not. But it doesn't mean that I don't respect that this is a Christian country, first and foremost, founded on Christian values, and furthermore, that it is the monarch's job, amongst many jobs, to guard the Christian faith, the Church of England faith. So I agree completely. You know, he needs to remember, first and foremost, this country was founded on Christian values, and other people would do well to remember that as well. Talk, Phil, many years ago, I heard a speech by an American governor in which he said a country can be multiracial, but it cannot function if it's multicultural. Mark in Coventry, thank you very much indeed for that message, and I could not agree with you more. If I tried the number of times that I have said over the years that I personally believe, when it comes to multi-faith, fine, no problem at all. Practice whatever religion you want, but don't inflict it on others. If you happen to be in a country that is founded on a particular faith, you can expect that faith to reign supreme. In other words, if it's Christmas time, we will expect to see Christmas lights up, because it is Christmas in a Christian country. But if you are expecting to see any other religious festival, I think is the word I'm looking for, really, happening any time of year, fine, but don't expect public acknowledgement for it, because it is not right in a Christian country. Thank you very much indeed for that, Mark. Right, let's get a voice note, shall we? This voice note comes from Elle, and it is regarding the King's speech. Take it away, Elle.
My dad was in the RAF. He signed up voluntarily at 17 to serve in the war. and he was in the RAF for 7 years, and then he was in the diplomatic services for the whole of his life. We lived in Crowborough because it was close to work. So I feel really sorry for them now with all these asylum seekers being put in there. It's a lovely little place. It's not fair. And then we moved up to Milton Keynes with his work. I bought a house. I was in there for 24 years. I thought I'd die in that house. I loved that house, bought and paid for. And all the HMOs that sprung up around me, I didn't feel safe with my 2 blonde daughters, so I had to sell up and move. So King Charles doesn't know about his people, and he needs to just wind his neck in.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Elle. I will say one thing, that I personally don't believe that, regardless of what anyone thinks of the potential political views of our king, that there is any need for disrespect. So I would personally ask a favour to respect him and to refer to him as either the king or indeed His Majesty, which is the correct way to address the monarch. However, I do appreciate you are entitled to your opinion. Your opinion does absolutely matter here at all. Elle, thank you very much indeed for that, and I'm truly very, very sorry to hear about what you've gone through with the HMOs that are popping up in terms of the area that you were living in and how you've had to move because you no longer feel safe. I wished I could say it was the first time I'd heard something like that, but the truth is it isn't. Those kind of stories crop up all the time here on Talk, and it is because we are prepared to talk about them, unlike other potential broadcasters who would just bury their heads in the sand and pretend that that problem does not exist. We do not. We don't shy away from it. It's very simple. It's a massive problem to a great number of people who don't feel safe in their own community anymore because of the individuals that we are allowing to move in and to basically, for want of a better term, take over that area. It is hideously disturbing, very, very worrying, and I don't understand why we don't treat it for what it is. It is very clearly an invasion, and until people say otherwise, I just don't see the problem changing. Now, that doesn't mean to say that people can't move here perfectly legitimately and integrate if they so wish to. Of course they can. But if they're going to come via nefarious methods and certainly carry out some pretty nefarious practices, well, then it stands to reason that we are going to be very wary of them. And I personally am not going to shy away from it. I hope you won't do the same. This is Talk. Your opinion matters. More of it right after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It is indeed Talk at Christmas. This is Phil Dave at Christmas as well, with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for your company. I really do very much appreciate it. Taking your thoughts this morning on what you made of the King's speech. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Do get involved in that discussion because so far not one person has said the same thing. Fascinating to hear what you have to say. Have your say, get your opinion on air. 0344 499 1000 if you want to call us. That's if you want to send us a WhatsApp, and it's also the same number if you want to send us a voice note. We'll get to more voice notes in just a moment's time as well. And if you want to send a traditional text message, SMS as they used to call it back in the day, then you can send that to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Someone else who I'm also delighted to have the company of on this Boxing Day morning is royal biographer Angela Levin, who joins us now to analyse some of the royal antics that we have witnessed in the past 48 hours. Angela, a very good morning to you. And if it's not too late to wish you a Merry Christmas for yesterday, I hope you had a good one. So
it's never too late to wish anything, that is it?
Well, I hope not. I hope not. But at the same time, I sort of feel slightly dubious about the idea of wishing people Happy New Year when you get to February, because just because you haven't seen them for all of January, it does start to sound a bit weird.
True.
So there is a cut-off somewhere along the line. Anyway, Angela, we're not here necessarily to talk about such trivial matters because, as I've said, the crux of this morning's show has all been about the interpretations of His Majesty's speech yesterday. So that's got to be where I start. What did you make of what the King had to say for himself yesterday?
Well, I'm not too negative about it. I thought I might be when the week before he was saying so much about Muslims and we must, be so grateful and all that. And I thought that it was too much when it's Christmas. Any time he can do it, but Christmas is for Christians. And I thought that. I wondered what the digital detox meant with his speech. And it says to allow our souls to renew. Well, I'm not quite sure how one does that. It's a very odd sort of thing. I think he's very careful this time because he doesn't want any fighting going on or people saying wrong things or Harry or anybody saying you haven't got my picture on the table. He's standing up, so he's getting away from all that shouting at him about, you've left me out. But I do think still that there are phrases which you can actually interpret. One of it is saying, you should go and get some new friends. And I thought that was very much for,
I noticed that line as well.
Yeah, Andrew and Harry, that actually he's not going to spend all his time being very upset about how they're behaving. You have to move on. And I thought that's all right. But then when you said, you've got to look back on the 80th birth anniversary.
Commemoration of VE Day and VJ Day.
That actually a lot of people can't remember that. And I don't think that you necessarily want to look back to the war. I think there's things you can find in your own life and more modern that will help you. Otherwise, I thought it was a very good speech. I thought he didn't want to talk all about himself, about his illness, which I thought was wise because he's explained that he is much better. And he didn't want to draw anyone else in which could attack him. So I thought it was a calm, kind, nice thing to do.
Don't get me wrong, I fully appreciate the fact that clearly His Majesty's speech was meant with the best possible intentions. I really do believe that, you could take from it what you will, and people have been very vocal this morning about what they thought about it, including myself. I have said that I believe that it was as near to being political as it can get without him actually sort of expressing a particular view. And as much as I understand I make it very clear that I'm not of Christian faith, but as much as I can appreciate the Christian value behind, or the value of the Christian belief of love thy neighbour, I do get that completely. But my problem is, how can you love a neighbour that doesn't respect you or doesn't love you back? And that's what I have a bit of an issue. It's almost suggesting that the onus falls on the British public to adapt towards those who may have come over to Britain in however many recent years and have decided for whatever reason that they have no respect for British values and therefore they're not going to respect a British way of life. That's where I thought it was slightly wrong. I feel the onus needs to be more on those who refuse to integrate, that they need to integrate.
Yes, I know what you mean. I think that he does say when he came and took the crown that he actually wants everybody of every religion to be part of his life. And I thought that that was a kind thing. But I think when you're being very specific about your next neighbour or the person who lives across the road or has bad behaviour, I think it doesn't matter. It wipes out what he's saying. I think it's the only time he got a chance to talk a bit politically. He can't do these things the rest of the time. And so he was saying
Should
that.
he be doing it at all, though?
Pardon?
Should he be doing it at all, though? I don't remember the late Queen getting political, really.
No, but she insinuated things which you could understand quite easily. She was very good at saying something, and then you thought about it and you knew exactly what she was saying. And I think he's a great man, and I think he's trying his best and he's kind. And I don't like the fact that people don't like him because he is generous by nature, but on the other hand he has to be careful and tread carefully, and I think that's what he's trying to do. You know, if somebody's no good, find another friend. I think that is actually quite good to fill in with that.
Yeah. No, look, don't get me wrong, I make it very clear I have huge respect. I've said this several times today. I absolutely have huge respect for the monarch, for the king, and I believe that this country would be a heck of a lot worse without a monarch. However, let's move on slightly, because one person I absolutely don't believe that this country would be worse off from if we never heard from him again, I'm afraid, is as the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew, that of course being Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as we must now refer to him as. Please do tell us what happened with Andrew yesterday, because he was nowhere to be seen.
No, he's gone away and nobody knows where he is. I think he's well over 100 miles away, which is good. Let him go off. I don't think he's going to worry too much. He might be sulking now, but I think he's trying to get in touch with some of his friends abroad and do business. I mean, he's not going to be beaten down by his brother. He doesn't like Charles. He doesn't listen to what he's saying, and he'll try very much to do what he likes. But where the problem comes is that he's really upset his daughters, and both of them, and they have trusted him, or they felt they should be on his side. And I think that letting them down, saying that he wasn't speaking to what's his name, Epstein, was not good enough. And I think that they have said the right thing to stay with the king and be with people who are you can honourably feel about them. And his father's got to behave better. You know, telling his daughters, and I know he did that he didn't speak to them after 2010 is a complete lie. He's got all the work from America coming over, that he was communicating with him for much longer. And so I think that they're the two that they really have been hurt. And that it's very interesting that the king put them quite near the front. The people behind them was William and Catherine, which I was quite surprised about.
Yeah, that I actually thought that was a sort of as near to a proverbial two fingers as the monarch could probably issue to his brother, is to say, well, look, if you're not going to treat your daughters with the reverence that they deserve in the way they behaved compared to his behaviour, I will instead. And I did notice that, and I actually thought that was very, very telling.
You thought it was a good idea, or not?
Oh, no, absolutely, I did. I thought it was very telling.
Yes.
I thought it was a very, very, very telling situation. Look, I really do. I don't want to spend too long talking about Andrew, not least because we are sort of up against it, but I actually sort of wanted to get your thoughts on whether or not, do you think, because I believe that when it comes to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, that he wouldn't be in half the predicament he is had he just not tried to treat everyone as stupid. If he'd have just been honest and said, you know what, I've made a terrible mistake here, I really do apologise, maybe this situation wouldn't be as bad as it is.
He won't apologise because he's so sort of pompous. That sort of person doesn't do that. So he's now sort of hitting him back in the face because he thinks he's so important.
Well, he has also strenuously denied doing any wrongdoing. Just finally, what I'd love to speak about is that, because I actually believe that in and amongst all of this scandal that the royal family seems to forever be submerged in, with thanks to the likes of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and others, I actually do believe that there is enormous hope for the future of the royal family, because I don't know if you had the chance to watch the royal carol service, but in particular there's a lot of reference been made to Princess of Wales, Catherine, and also Princess Charlotte having done their duet at the piano at the start of it, which I don't know if you saw that. I thought that was very nice indeed.
Yes.
And it also reassures me that there is a lot of decency left within the royal family, and that actually puts the scandal to one side, and at the core they're a good bunch.
Yes, me too. I thought it shows how beautifully they've been brought up, gently to know how to behave. Just the thing about the piano duet, it was fascinating because when I was still at school, I used to teach starters how to play the piano.
I did not know that about you, Angela. How amazing.
And the way to deal with it with somebody who might be nervous is you let them play one hand and you play the other, because it gives them much confidence. And also, if you look carefully, you could see that Catherine's arm was right round her, holding her tight. And then the lovely smiles they gave each other. Oh, it's so beautiful.
It was a lovely
very
moment. Very lovely moment.
Yes, this was very special. This is not sort of sit there, play, bash it out. They watched everything and made sure it would all be okay. And of course, it came off brilliantly, didn't it? Absolutely brilliantly.
Thank heavens there are some members of the royal family who know how not to put a foot wrong. Angela, I'm so sorry, but we have to leave it there just for no other reason this time. But thank you so much for having a chat with me this morning on Boxing Day. I really do appreciate that. That is, of course, Angela Levin there, royal biographer. Right. After this, we are going to hear more from you. Your calls, your thoughts, your messages. Keep them coming. What did you make of the King's speech yesterday? And if you didn't watch it, why not? I want to hear from you as well. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Get in touch and let me know what you think, because here at Talk, your opinion matters. We will be with you just after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Indeed, this is Talk at Christmas. A very good morning to you. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on Talk. Let's get some of your thoughts now, shall we? We're talking about the King's speech and what you made of it. We've got a voice note now. This comes from Anna. Anna, what have you got to say for yourself?
Good morning, Anna. Sorry. So let's identify the elephant in the room with the King's speech. That was clearly a vote for the Islamics. Well, let me tell you something. I'm not prepared to ignore the plight of the Jews in this country, courtesy of Charles trying to gloss over it. The Jews don't rape our children. They don't sexually assault our women. They don't blow themselves up. They don't stab people, and they don't try to exert their culture over Christianity. My grandma, our grandma, was a Jewish refugee into this country. And let me tell you something. She gave her soul to this country, and she embraced this country's culture. So no, the speech was a disgrace, and please, no more.
Anna, thank you very much indeed for that very passionate voice note there. A couple of things to pick up on that I really want to make very, very clear. We're never going to get anywhere if we accuse a whole religion as being a problem, because the truth is it's not a whole religion. It's exactly the same reason and the same way that when we see what's going on in the Middle East, when people blame the Jews the world over for what is going on in Israel, that's where the problem lies, is because there's no distinction between those who mean to cause us harm and those who do not. And you cannot tarnish a whole religion by saying that someone who happens to be of Muslim faith is going around committing some of the most appalling things against British citizens. Because many Muslims, I know you didn't say British citizens, but you know what I mean, I think you said our girls or something like that. You used the expression there. And I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that we need to recognise that this is actually almost nothing to do with religion, because the reason why the vast majority of people, regardless of what their religion, know how to behave is because actually those religions teach us the correct way to behave. What happens is you get a handful of individuals who carry out something in the name of a religion, and then suddenly it tarnishes the whole thing. And the reason why these cowards do that is because they're hiding behind the good name of a religion. So exactly the same way that I personally don't believe for a second that my Judaism has got anything to do with the way that I would carry out something or behave. You know, obviously it teaches me certain values, but it does not mean that I would do something in the name of it. And I think that's what we need to be very careful of. What we're talking about here are the fundamentalists. And with regards to His Majesty's speech, I have to say one thing I noticed was there was an awful lot of reference to Judaism. In one particular moment, there was, of course, mention of the horrendous attack that happened in Bondi Beach recently. But I also saw that there was reference to the Manchester Synagogue attack in there. And indeed, also, there was a bit of footage with the chief rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mervis. So I slightly disagree that it was to the detriment of Jewish people, but in particular, what I really want to make very clear to anyone is that I'm all for people having their opinion, but just be very careful that we've got to recognise that the only way we're ever really truly going to unite our once great nation and extinguish the threat of extremism is by treating it as just that, a threat of extremism in the name of a religion that the vast majority of that religion does not recognise. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Joan is calling us from Sunderland. Joan, a very good morning to you.
Hello, and a happy Christmas to you.
And to you, Joan. I hope you had a very good day yesterday. What would you like to say about the King's speech?
Well, I'm pleased that this speech was better than one he made before, when he was with Starmer, which really annoyed me, when he said that this country had no borders, and he was on about irregular migrants. This country does have a border. It isn't policed, and these migrants are not irregular. They come over continually, sometimes nearly 2,000 a week. So that is something that I was pleased that was never mentioned again. as I say, his speech was, I thought, all right, but I'm a Christian and I would like him to be more of a head of the Church of England. I know he can't get involved politically with things that are happening in this country, but I feel this country is changing rapidly. Our values, our culture is being attacked.
I think it's worse than that, Joan. I think it's being eroded. Attacked,
Yeah.
I could live with. Eroded
Yeah.
is what I can't stand.
I know. And what also upsets me is when retailers become thought police, when silly little things that you're not allowed to say, Christmas trees, Christmas jumpers, the festive trees, festive jumpers.
Oh, it's disgusting, isn't it?
They can go and take a hike. But you see, that is the thin edge of the wedge. People think that's silly and, oh, it's nothing, it's inconsequential. That is the start of the erosion. It's push a little bit more. If I was a military person, it would be mission creep.
Yeah. No, Joan, I find it very hard to disagree with what you say there. And in particular, one thing that I've absolutely noticed in successive years is the way in which Christmas has been continuously watered down, is the only way I can describe it. And actually, the King's speech for me yesterday was just further proof of that. I want to be able to walk up a high street and see Christmas lights everywhere. I want to see every shop marking Christmas, celebrating Christmas. I want to be able to see local communities gather and doing little sort of like markets and stuff like that, having mulled wine, all of these different things. Please obviously drink responsibly, but all of these things that we should be seeing at Christmas time that we're just not. And why? What? Because we're worried about offending someone? No. Let me put it to you like this, very simply. If you are anti-Christmas, you offend me. That's what I think of you. Right, let's look at some of these messages. Joan, thank you very much indeed for calling us from Sunderland. I hope you have a wonderful Boxing Day. Howard says, Phil, doing a sterling job. That's very kind of you, Howard. I'm perfectly sure there'll be people who disagree with that, but thank you. King's speech. First thing I noticed with someone who would have top tailor was his ill-fitting suit, so I turned off. Thank you for that, Howard. Well, I must admit that wasn't the first thing I noticed, but I did think the jacket did look a little bit baggy on him. But then I must admit, and I don't want to make you feel bad, but the thought did cross my mind. I wonder if that's anything to do with the treatment he's undergoing. But even so, you're right. Why didn't a tailor maybe alter it? But thank you for that, Howard. I do appreciate it. And this message here seems to come from, it looks like it comes from Harvey and Pauline, I'm guessing, so not sure which one of you has message. Phil, morning, you're doing a great job. That's very kind, thank you. The King's carefully constructed speech was weak, to say the least. Yes, we do all want to live in harmony, but he should have recognised that there are evil forces at work in his realm. He should have said anyone preventing said harmony will be dealt with the full force of the law of this land and will be deported to whence they came. Don't think he can really use the King's speech for that purpose per se, but I hear what you're saying. That would have been more reassuring to his subjects. I'm afraid he doesn't have the grit of his mother. Always been wishy-washy. Thank you very much indeed for that message. Look, of course, that is your opinion. You're perfectly entitled to it. I don't personally think that that is what a King's speech should be used for, because, to be honest, it's the government who should be saying that anyone who doesn't agree with the laws of the land will feel the full force of the law. But however, it is your opinion, and I've always said you are perfectly entitled to it and perfectly welcome to it. Right, OK, coming up after the break, we are going to be joined by the sensational Benedict Spence, of course, Conservative commentator. He's going to be here going through the top stories of the day. And, of course, we'll continue to take more of your thoughts as well. Get in touch with us, 0344 499 1000. See you in a sec.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is indeed Talk. It's 2 minutes past midday on Boxing Day. Happy Boxing Day, or Merry Boxing Day, as someone wished me earlier. I've never heard that one before. But I do hope that you're having a splendid time, whatever you're up to. Thank you so much indeed for choosing Talk. It's Phil Dave with you for the next hour, with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. And we are talking about a plethora of subjects today, but one in particular that I really want your help analysing is the King's speech that we heard yesterday, because of course in his speech His Majesty took the moment to remind us of the importance of unity and being kind unto those maybe less fortunate than ourselves. Maybe, you might say, traditional messages you'd expect to hear at this time of year, but of course there were some who have said that there was an undercurrent of politics around it, particularly when trying to encourage people to get to know new friends and their neighbours, possibly suggesting maybe that we have to adapt British citizens towards recognising how the country has changed over the years, certainly in recent years. Who knows? Maybe it's all in my imagination. Maybe it's what you're thinking. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number if you would like to get involved with that particular discussion. Going to be joined in just a moment by the marvellous Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, is in the studio. Yes, he has trekked in on this Boxing Day morning to be with you, so we'll speak to him shortly. Just want to read out this message here from Rob in Surrey. Rob says, hello Phil, I think everyone is making a mountain out of a molehill. The King's speech was aimed at bringing people together. Like it or not, the UK is multicultural, and he was delivering a speech that encompassed that fact. The King is not responsible for all that's wrong with the UK. He has no political power. Rob, I think that there are many things that you've said that you're absolutely spot on. You're quite right. Indeed, the King does not have political power, in spite of some people believing that he still does have. But, of course, he does not. You are right. But one thing that I would have to disagree with is that he's not necessarily responsible for what goes wrong. But if you were to see the monarch endorsing some of the, I'm going to call it erosion, of what we've seen of this once great country over the recent years, then some might say that is slightly problematic. But that's just what I believe. But what do you think? 0344 499 1000. Right. Let us welcome to the studio, and on this fine Boxing Day now afternoon, Benedict Spence. A very good afternoon to you.
Hello, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. I hope you are as well. I trust you had a very Merry Christmas.
Oh, there was no snow, so my normal pastime of throwing snowballs at passers-by couldn't come to fruition. That's why I'm here. I had nothing else going on.
Please reassure us that you didn't find a substitute to throw at them instead.
I can't afford to throw substitutes at people.
Excellent.
I need that coal.
Yeah. I see what you did there. Excellent stuff. Now, OK, we're going to go through the top stories that you're waking up to today. I mean, I say waking up to, I know it's midday, but but some people are still waking up. Come on, it's Boxing Day. We're supposed to be relaxed, right? And one in particular that has caused a bit of a ruckus this morning is the story about this mansion tax. Thousands more to be hit by mansion tax amid overvaluation fears. So the new mansion tax plan, the UK government is preparing to introduce a high-value property tax targeting homes worth over £2 million, with the extra annual council tax surcharges coming into force from 2028, and it could be anything from £2,500 to £7,500, depending on the valuation. Now, that in itself is not a shock or not a worry. Where I think the crux of this story that a lot of people are concerned about is the way in which they're going to do these valuations. Yes. The valuation themselves is going to be led by a valuation office agency, the VOA, using automated digital models. So in other words, what will happen is they'll use AI and all sorts of things like that based on market figures to determine the value of a property without someone seeing it in person. Yeah. This is concerning.
It is. It's not. I don't think it's going to. I think everybody knows it's not going to end well. There are going to be problems with this. And I'd love to know, is this going to be done sort of in real time? So could your tax bill go down sort of as you're watching it, as the value of your property does as well?
I'm somehow guessing not.
Exactly.
I think they'll take the highest value and run with it.
Yeah, and I think that this, of course, it's very interesting, given that the property market in London and the south of England, where a lot of these properties are going to be congregated, is plummeting right now because nobody has the money. The bubble has, it perhaps hasn't burst quite as spectacularly as some people predicted it might do, but it's certainly deflating. So where it is exactly that people fall on the spectrum, I'm sure there's going to be an awful lot of houses that once upon a time were going for over 2 million, 18 months ago. Within a very short space of time, we're going to be under 2 million, you'd imagine. Everything being stripped out to make sure that they can't be valued as highly as possible. I mean, quite apart from the fact that obviously just sort of slapping different taxes on property is not necessarily the sort of way that you'd want to go around raising funds, but that far be it from me to try and tell Labour how to run an economy. As you say, the fact that this is being outsourced to artificial intelligence, which we all know is a very imperfect technology and one that is, frankly, just barely existed in the form that it did a couple of years ago, and we don't know where it's going to be in a few years' time. And especially, of course, also against the backdrop of the fact that there is something of a bubble going on in the AI sphere, and you don't necessarily know who the major players are going to be in a couple of years' time, who owns the technology that the government is possibly going to be using, who actually owns that, who will own it in a couple of years' time, how reliable is it? These are all questions that I suspect they probably couldn't answer, as much as anything else, because the people that they're purchasing the technology from can't answer.
Well, there's also some pretty nefarious means, I'd say, by doing it like this, because if you think about it, number one, it stops certain people whose livelihood it is to be chartered surveyors actually making any money out of this, which of course they do heavily rely on, funnily enough, valuing people's properties. So that's one element of it. The other is, where is this software coming from? Who is in charge of this software? And how do we know that there's not only going to be the unbiased accuracy required for something like this, but furthermore, how do we also know that it won't actually be tweaked to suit whoever it suits?
What I suspect is that at some point human beings are going to have to be employed to go over this data anyway, probably in the wake of some scandal, when it turns out that the data's actually, that the artificial intelligence has got it wrong anyway. At which point you might as well just ask the question, well, why simply not employ human beings in the first place? I think, we all have very high, lofty expectations of what AI may do one day, but the fact that it's not here yet in that form, I think is deeply concerning, and it really does speak to the sort of the meanness of this government, which is that, as you say, normally you'd employ human beings. Those are people, to use a government's own way of looking at it, these are things of value within the economy. These are units of value, human beings who create value. You pay them, they pay tax, they put more money back into the economy. The government will look at this and say, but actually what we're doing is we're saving the taxpayer money. But you're not necessarily doing that if you're putting people out of a job who otherwise would have been quite good earners, quite good contributors to the economy. So it doesn't quite follow through. And then, of course, if you end up having to pay human beings to go through the errors after the fact anyway, then you'll probably end up spending more money. And, that's just, I think, a very treasury-brained way of looking at this. Think about what the short-term saving might be without thinking for 1 second what the long-term expenditure might be, at which point you end up spending more over time.
And that's before we've even got what it would do to the housing market.
Oh, the housing market in this country is cooked.
It is, but I mean, it's going to make it even worse, and that's what really is quite well, it's just one of the things that's unnerving.
A generation of people were effectively told, put all of your store in the housing market, all of your investments, everything, set your store in property. And now here we are in a position where people of my generation can't buy houses. Older people now can't sell their houses because they're terrified of the stamp duty. They don't want to invest in upgrading their houses or improving them now because the value might go up. And so you've got this nasty sort of situation where nobody's quite sure what the value of any of these things are. And in many cases, of course, these were people's long-term investments, maybe even their pension pots, that they can't monetize in the same way. They can't downsize. They can't put those back onto the market. And all the while, you've got the Labour Party sat there going, well, this isn't really a market, it's a source of tax.
They
and
can't,
it's great for us to fund other things.
They can't even hand it down to successive generations through fear of the tax that might come to them.
It's a disaster.
Now, speaking of taxpayers to be kept in the dark over the cost of public sector union duties. So this in particular, the government's new employment law reforms will mean that the public will no longer be told how much money is actually spent on paid time off for union officials. This is obviously in the public sector. The previous bodies, such as the NHS, schools, councils and government departments, all of those, they were required to report on how much they spent on what's called facility time. So this is paid time off for union duties. But that requirement has now been scrapped. Disaster waiting to happen shortly.
It is, and people are going to milk this. People are going to take the proverbial out of this. And you know,
pleased you said that.
Yeah, yes. But yeah, it is Christmas after all, and this is a family-friendly show. It's honestly, you already know what's going to end up happening as a result of this, and I think part of the basis on which unions operate in this country is of trust, actually. It's about transparency. It's the very antithesis of what's going on. It's about sort of taking on vested interests and closed shops and opening them up. And that means being open to scrutiny as well. You need to be able to trust, if you're a member of a union, you need to be able to trust that your union representatives are using your fees and therefore by extension the time that you're allocating them sensibly, properly, in the pursuit of union dues. So the fact that you might just go, oh, actually, it doesn't matter what we get up to and you have no right to know about it, and neither does anybody else. I just think...
Well, I'd argue we blooming well do if it's public money, and this is what frustrates me.
Public is the key word there, public.
Because then herein lies the problem, is if someone somewhere along the chain decides to, shall we generously say, twist the books. I'm going to be kind when I say that, but let's be honest, there are stronger ways of putting it.
Yeah.
If they were to do that, even if by accident, if a government now turns round, a successive governments, and then turn round and start saying to us, oh, well, actually, our public finances have got an even bigger imaginary black hole than they used to. Is this not just an excuse to drive even more tax out of us just to pay for the mismanagement of others? And as we know, there are certain members of certain unions who like to cause mischief, and that again is me putting it very, very mildly. And they're not going to be nice about this.
No, and you don't want to assume the worst in people, but we're all human. We all understand how people operate, and we especially understand how people operate when there is no scrutiny. We know full well how government and authority operates when there is no scrutiny, and I think it's deeply concerning. You know, this, of course, comes in the wake of steps to delay things like, you know, local elections and things like that. It seems to be, now that Labour are in, that they view these things like, you know, public service and transparency as optional, and in fact as, you know, irritants, as things that ought to be just sort of swept out of the way. Now that they're in office, they feel that actually none of this stuff really matters, and you can kind of just go about doing what you want. Say what you would like for the Conservatives and their all-round uselessness over the last however many years it was. They were
there was quite a lot of uselessness.
Yeah, there was, but there was at least a sense of, well, we should be a little bit more transparent about these things. I mean, that was part of the problem, was that they kept on calling inquiries into all sorts of things and revealing what had been going on in the past.
Started on inquiry. They are such a waste of money.
They are a huge waste of money.
Absolutely hate. All inquiries are smoke and mirrors for a government looking like they're doing something when they're doing nothing.
That is all it is. At the end, lessons will be learned.
Yeah,
and then you say, so what was the inquiry into? And everybody goes, well, we don't remember. It started so long ago.
No, it's absolute bunkum. I hate it.
Yeah, it's going to end up, we all know how it's going to end up. There are going to be people who use this newfound, I was about to say privilege, but it's power, this newfound option, for reasons untoward, not what they're supposed to be doing, and then there will be a scandal, and it will come out in the end, because I know that this government seems to think it's very clever and it can just hide everything. These things do come out, people do notice, and then there is a problem. But of course, the way they will be looking at it is, it'll be somebody else's problem, because they'll be long gone by the time it actually comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there
Really
is something, I was going to say, hope you're having a marvellous Boxing Day. There is something that I think will not surprise people. If you missed this little nugget for today, apparently a new poll commissioned by The Independent, and not exactly a right-leaning publication, a poll commissioned by The Independent actually shows significant dissatisfaction with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer among 2024 Labour voters. So 38% of people who voted for Labour back in 2024 said the party would have a better chance of winning the next election with a different leader. Now, I've got to say, and I don't often say in fairness to Keir Starmer, but we sort of saw what changing leaders every 5 minutes did for the Tories. Do we really believe that a change in leadership, unless it's a general election, is going to do a thing for Labour's fortunes?
Well, this is always the thing, isn't it? Yes, he's a useless leader, but what does that say about the party that selected him as the best of the best? And the problem is not, in fact, Sir Keir Starmer, as much as I don't think that he's particularly good. The major problem that has hindered him and Rachel Reeves is his own party. It's his backbenchers. They are, in fact, the people you need to change if you would like a change in direction. Therein, I'm afraid, lies the problem. And, of course, you can't do that unless you call a general election, which he's not going to do because he'd lose it. That's the problem that Labour currently faces. You're right. I don't think at this point I see a candidate who would offer anything different that the MPs would actually go for. This is the key thing. If you've got Rachel Reeves coming out and saying, well, look, I'll raise the taxes, but I also need to cut some spending, and then they all have histrionics and they all start, screaming about how it's, appalling human rights abuses, people will go hungry because you can't cut, £4 off somebody's benefit payment, then you're not going to get any tangible progress. Even if you change it to Wes Streeting or, Ed Miliband, if you're feeling like having a bit of a laugh, even if you do that, nothing's actually going to change. You and I have
got a very strange understanding of the word laugh. If you think changing to Ed Miliband.
Listen, we are jaded by experience. We've lived through all of this period at all, and frankly, I think seeing Ed Miliband, the redemption story from being formerly one of the worst Labour leaders in history to becoming the next leader.
I'm old enough to remember Labour leader Ed Miliband, leader of the opposition, and I didn't like that. So making him Prime Minister, no thank you very much indeed.
Would you take Wes Streeting?
Now, curiously, I have to say, I actually think that Wes Streeting is probably the least worst of the bunch, but that doesn't say much about the bunch.
He's least likely to become leader.
No, but that doesn't say much about the bunch. Now, don't get me wrong. It has to be said that through work, I have actually, I've had the pleasure, if you like, of actually meeting Wes Streeting. I was quite determined to dislike him, but I have to say I found him to be a very pleasant individual, very likeable, very friendly, and a very warm individual, which is actually all kind of qualities one would expect to see in a Prime Minister.
Give him 6 months as Prime Minister. You'll hate him just as much as the rest of us.
However, I dare say that that's just from one encounter. So who knows? But I've got to be honest that when your gauge, your barometer is the rest of this current shower of Labour politicians, then that doesn't really say very much. Another person who sort of stood out to me a mile ages ago, and curiously they've got rid of him now, was Chuka Umunna. Now, I would say if you dig deep enough and go back into various politicians' histories, who only knows what you will find. I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in the here and now. I think we're too obsessed with history. We can learn from history, but I'm more interested in what politicians do in this day and age. And what my major concern is that if Labour voters, 1 in 3, say that they think Sir Keir Starmer is that bad, he needs to go, then what hope is there for any of us? And on that happy note, 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Have your say. Get involved in the conversation. Still plenty of time with you until 1 o'clock. Benedict's here as well until at least 30:30. He might stay longer if he fancies it. Who knows? We'll see. See what happens. He's made the effort to come in. We might as well. 0344 499 1000. Get involved in the conversation. This is Phil Dave. This is Talk. See you in a minute.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on the home of common sense and free speech, but of course it is also the home of where your opinion matters. 0344 499 1000 is definitely the telephone number you need to make a note of. I'm joined in the splendid company in the studio, Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, thank you very much for sticking with us. There's a message here I just want to read out because it's off the back. Earlier we were talking about the King's speech, and I'm going to get your thoughts on that in just a moment as well. But there's a message here that's come in that's from Barry. It says, "Afternoon, Phil. Why do we have to show the King respect? Respect is a two-way street. The days when we had to doff our caps saying sir, no sir, or yes or no sir, sorry, are gone. I revered his mother, but this monarch is totally out of touch with the shambles this country is in. He says, not my king, betrayer of the Christian faith." Barry. Now, Barry, let me be very clear. First and foremost, the line, not my king, is ridiculous. It means nothing. He is the king. You can say you don't recognise him as the king if you want, but it is a bit silly because he is the king, and there is literally nothing you can do to change that. So, I'm not completely with you on that front, but I would say rather than show the king respect, just don't show the monarch disrespect. That's all I'd ask. So, if you don't want to like the monarch, that's your problem, up to you. But please, maybe just sort of understand that for many, many centuries, this country has had a monarch, and it falls to British people out of common courtesy to show respect to the monarch.
I think, I mean, for a start, to echo what you're saying, if the guy's face is on your money, I think you're kind of struggling to escape the fact that he's kind of at the top.
I was going to say, you're not going to win the argument, not my king.
Yeah, I mean, shout as loud as you like, maybe you'll get somewhere, but I doubt it. But I think that's a curious contribution, though, because I suspect that Barry is not anti-monarchist, probably just more the person of the king.
Yeah.
And of course, this is a bit like this, something that Roman Catholics have to go through as well. Every time the Pope changes and they think, oh, does he absolutely ascribe to this sort of interpretation of Catholicism I do? No. Well, in the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope is infallible. You're kind of stuck with him. And it's not quite the same, obviously, with the king, because he doesn't have the same sort of political influence or power that he used to. He still hypothetically does have a lot of power. He just chooses not to wield it. That's not to say that he doesn't have any political power. I think, though, that Charles is a product of an era, and I think that that's how you have to view him. Not as somebody who is sort of sold out in the short term. He is the product of his entire lifetime, and he has gone from seeing Britain being, I don't want to say monocultural, because Britain was never monocultural in that sense, that, 4 composite nations make up this country. But at the same time, it was not multicultural in the same way that it is now, and some would argue it's not really multicultural in the way that it's often portrayed. But whether he likes it or not, whether we like it or not, this is the lot that he's been dealt, and he does actually have to try and steer a path between these different communities. Now, he's not going to sit there, is he, and say XYZ group should be ostracized because I don't like their view. I mean, sure. Can we just imagine if he tries to do that, or XYZ group should be deported because I don't think they should be here? Obviously not, especially if they've come from Commonwealth countries, or countries of which he is also the head of state.
Obviously you're right, Benedict, but I think the difference is, and this, from this perspective, I understand what Barry's getting at, funnily enough. So Barry, like I've said, you and everyone is entitled to their opinion, and I welcome all opinions, but don't expect opinions not to be challenged or questioned or quizzed, because that's just the way we roll here. But in terms of what you say, a traitor to the Christian faith, now, I don't think it's so much. I don't think that is quite right. You know, clearly His Majesty.
Roman Catholics would have a lot to say about that as well.
Yeah, about the Church of England. I dare say that His Majesty has got a lot of faith behind him, and obviously all he's trying to do is just be all-encompassing. But what I would prefer, and I'd almost have more respect for, is recognising that this country is founded on Christian values, and it is a Christian country. People can argue otherwise. Just because Christianity doesn't necessarily make up the majority anymore, it is still a Christian country. Bottom line is that the values of which our laws are based is Christianity. So therefore it is a Christian country. You can't argue with that. However, what I would say is that I feel that, though, that on Christmas Day, if you can't only talk about Christianity, then when the heck can you? It's a Christian festival, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm speaking as someone who's Jewish.
I think this is a tricky thing as well, isn't it? Because, you know, it seems to be increasingly the case that lots of people also, I don't actually think it's religious people from other faiths that, you know, sort of do down Christianity. I think, as you said there, Christianity is no longer the majority, but that's not because there are lots of Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs or Jews, or, you know, there are a lot of those, but it's equally because an awful lot of people who would have traditionally been Christian are now just overtly atheist. And actually, I think that a lot of the slander, if you like, a lot of the criticism, a lot of the slings and arrows, they come from more people who are just very, I think, cynical towards Christianity, not other faiths. I think, obviously, you're always going to get people of other faiths who've got a problem with it. I think, you know, that becomes a bit of a social media phenomenon. Every year there are some parts of the country where, obviously, there are no Christmas decorations because that's not, you know, what they observe. We can have a conversation about whether or not that's acceptable and about the concept of integration, because I do think that that is an important conversation, but equally, integration or a lack of integration is not the king's fault. Simply because some communities have chosen, or rather not chosen, not been required to integrate properly into society, whereas others have.
Absolutely.
You know, that's not actually the king's fault. We can blame successive governments for that, and we should, but I think that that needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, precisely the point I made earlier on as well. It was literally those words exactly. It is not the king's responsibility to integrate society. It is the government's responsibility, successive governments who have failed on so many levels to do that. And furthermore, I'd suggest that rather than the onus being on the great British public to adapt, I would suggest the onus has to go on those individuals who have chosen not to integrate. That is their choice not to do that, or to make the effort to do so, and therefore the onus should go on that. So maybe, just maybe, I could find fault with that, suggesting that actually the idea of us reaching out to our neighbour, or as the king rather sort of Pollyanna-ish put it, make a new friend, I understand that, but at the same time it's only because I respect the concept of Christianity that says love thy neighbour, rather than I actually agree that the problem is with the British public rather than the individual who has chosen, deliberately or otherwise, not to integrate.
I think that that's a fair summary of this. I think that we have to remember, actually, that the average British person, of whatever background it is, does not sort of go around their day sort of being generally hostile to people of other cultures or other faiths. But I think it is very interesting that we certainly now have within our society, a group of people who feel, you know, disconnected from religion, they're not religious, and they perhaps feel rather hostile towards the religious elements of the state. And I do think that that's something that needs to be borne in mind. There are also certain communities that have been brought into this country, and often they'll be of the same religion as another group that is well integrated, but, you know, perhaps just a different cultural background. That is, as you say, that's the fault of the state for not doing what they do in the United States, for example, which is trying to, you know, almost sort of hammer it into their children and to their, you know, grandchildren that you are an American citizen. In this country, it's almost a sort of a blasé kind of, well, if you want to be, but you don't have to be. But also, it's a little bit gauche. It's a little bit, we don't do that sort of thing. We don't.
I think it's almost. I think it's worse. It's almost we're taught to be ashamed of it.
But I think that's part of that sort of group who, that sort of, for lack of a better word, I don't really want to use the word native, but you know what I mean, that sort of, you know, group of people who sort of 100 years ago would have been sort of church-going, you know, normal people in this country, but have now sort of slipped away from that. This is not, because this is an important aspect, I think, when it comes to the question of migration. actually the average atheist is not a migrant. The average migrant is quite religious from lots of different backgrounds. The sort of the apathy towards a lot of the traditions in this country are people who can trace their ancestry back, if they so care to do so, many generations, if not centuries. So it's not actually just about saying, you know, when we're talking about being a traitor to the Christian faith or whatever like that, actually an awful lot of the traitors to the Christian faith are just people whose grandparents or parents were Christians and have just given up. It's nothing to do with migration policy.
Look, we could talk about this all afternoon, but I do worry that it is symptomatic of the continuous message of the erosion of Christianity in this country. That's what worries me. If someone has decided off their own back that they no longer wish to follow their faith, fine. That's what we live in a free country for, and that's wonderful. I'm pleased that we live in a country that says you can choose whatever you want to do faith-wise. What I have a problem with is people doing it possibly, and I don't know this for sure, but I'd be curious to know the statistics if there are such a thing, of how many are doing it out of fear of what might happen if they're proud Christians, and that's what bothers me. But do you know what? We could talk about it all afternoon. Sure. Sadly, we absolutely can't. Benedict, thank you so much for popping in to see us this afternoon. It's very much appreciated. Have a splendid Boxing Day, whatever you're up to.
You too.
And we shall continue this discussion and many, many more in just a moment. So don't forget to get in touch. 0344 499 1000. There's still a chance to get your thoughts heard. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's just gone midday and it's Boxing Day, just in case you hadn't gathered. A very happy Boxing Day. Hope you're enjoying yourself. Whatever you are up to now, what you might be up to this afternoon is possibly going to catch a bit of the silver screen. We've been very, very full on with our topics today. So can we just take a moment to breathe and relax and remind ourselves the spirit of Boxing Day? And that's not necessarily to get het up about some of the grievances that we may have. Don't worry, we'll come back to them afterwards, but I just want to take 5 minutes because when I first got a message from our next guest to say that he was around on Boxing Day and would be prepared to join if we wanted him to, I couldn't possibly say no because, well, first of all, a bit full, but secondly, it's always a great pleasure to be on the air with him, which I am normally on his show on talkSPORT regularly once a week, talking all things technology. Well, technology might be my specialist subject, but the silver screen is most definitely Paul Ross's specialist subject, and I am so thrilled to say Mr. Ross joins us now. Good afternoon,
Well, Phil,
Paul.
how are you doing? You're looking very well, Sam. Happy Christmas belatedly and happy St Stephen's Day.
Indeed, yes, the same to you as well. Hope that your Boxing Day is treating you well and that you had a great Christmas.
I did actually, because I had some great presents. I was given a mini version of the original poster of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Oh my, hang on just a second, hold that up. Let's have a look at this. That's amazing. That's one of my favourite Hitchcock films.
It's a masterpiece. Somebody should remake it. The original novel was set in Cornwall. I also got sent a pillow, a cushion, one of my daughters, of It's a Wonderful Life, the best Christmas film of all time.
Fantastic.
And a memorial Julia Hartley Brewer cushion. Joking, of course. It's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, that great film Robert Aldrich directed with the wonderful Bessie Davis there.
Dear, oh dear, I'm going to get in so much trouble. Anyway, he's only been on 2 seconds. Thank you very much indeed for that. No, they're fantastic. Now, obviously, I do appreciate if you were listening to this rather than watching, you couldn't see the splendour of the presents that Paul was just holding up to the camera there. But do go and have a look on our YouTube channel, because I can highly recommend having a look. I just want to very quickly correct something, or just sort of get a right response here from Barry, who messaged in to say that this is in response to what I was saying about respecting the monarch. He says, after 25 years in the military, Phil, the Falklands, Northern Ireland and Iraq, I think I've earned the right to disrespect the king should I choose. Barry, you absolutely do. Totally and utterly up to you. I'm just personally asking for this show that we don't. However, no worries at all. Thank you very much indeed for your message, though. I do truly appreciate your opinion. Now, Mr. Ross, it would be remiss, based on this Boxing Day of ours, that we shouldn't... Oh, I sounded like Reagan there, didn't I? This Boxing Day of ours. But based on this Boxing Day of ours, that we shouldn't lament over the wonders of the silver screen, and I believe that you have been choosing some of your favourites. So shall we make a little start with the Ballad of Wallace Island? What is this about?
Well, I've got a few also rounds. One was A Ballad of a Small Player with Colin Farrell, which I think is on Netflix or Amazon. It's a brilliant film. Also, the 28 years later horror film was magnificent, and they've reinvented that franchise. But The Ballad of Wallace Island is something very special, very sweet, and very endearing. Think a modern-day Ealing comedy crossed with something like Local Hero, and it concerns a man who, with a bit of tragedy in his life, which you find out about, but he's won the lottery not once but twice, has effectively bought his own island off the coast of England. There's only 5 people in this film, and 2 of them are a folk duo, but the key player, played by Tim Key, who co-wrote it, who is sidekick Stephen in the Alan Partridge films. Very funny guy, very quirky. He basically loved a folk duo who were around big in the 90s, then split up. So he offers them an absolute fortune to come to his island and perform for them. He doesn't tell each of them that I'm getting the other person along. And one of them turns up, it's a male and female. The woman turns up with her new husband, who happens to be an American chap. It's a wonderful old lady who runs the shop. And basically it's about 2 hours long. Nothing much happens, but it's a wonderful, sweet human film. If you want to laugh and a bit of a cry, The Ballad of Wallace Island is the one for you. I've got the trailer for you if you want to have a look at it.
We do indeed. We do indeed. Should we have a little look at the trailer, shall we?
Here we go.
You made it okay? Is there not like a harbour? It's sort of nature's harbour. Welcome to Wallace Island. No. Do you sell rice? My phone got wet.
We've got pasta.
Has to be rice, apparently. Oh, you've got rice pudding, look. Rice pudding definitely won't work. Well, not with that attitude. No, it won't. You know it isn't. The great Herb Maguire. Coming all the way out there without your roadies. Which brings me to the thorny issue of payment. Where will the audience be? You said there'd be 100. I said less than 100. Is it just...
It is Justine. Yeah. Then Kerry Mulligan, who plays his wife, turns up. And I should say, Tim Key is a fascinating figure. He grew up in Cambridge area. He went to Sheffield University and read Russian. And then he came back to his home in Cambridge, pretending he was a student doing a PhD so he could join the Cambridge Footlights, where he met the guy who plays the male man of the folk, a guy called Thomas Basden, who co-wrote the script with him. And it's become this amazing star based on basically a showbiz PhD live. It's a lovely film, very sweet. I think you'd like this one, Phil.
I shall check it out. So that's the Ballad of Wallace Island. Now let's move on to the others. And we've got here Begonia. Are you much of a horticulturalist?
Well, not so much. And It's an interesting film, this. It's basically based on a Korean movie, and it's got Emma Stone in it, who has worked with the director. I'm about to mispronounce his name. Joris Lagathamios, I think you pronounce it. It's a Greek name. He made great films like Poor Things, The Lobster.
I'm very pleased you attempted it and I didn't have to.
Yeah,
Thank you
you
for
can
that.
you can give it a go later. But in the film, she plays the leader of a big pharmaceutical company, a big pharma company, and she gets kidnapped by two very strange guys, one of whom is autistic, and the other one of whom, whose mother is in a coma because of this pharmaceutical company, believes that this woman is actually the leader of or involved in an alien race that's been running human history for years and is about to destroy us all. And he bases it on the fact that
I think that very much about the Labour government.
Well, the curious thing about this film is, as it goes on, basically, it's got a biggish cast, but there's really only three main characters, and then a fourth one arrives. So they're holding a prisoner. They shave her head. It's a very disturbing film. It's also darkly funny, and it's got a kind of kick twist ending that I'd defy anybody. You may guess what's coming, but you don't quite guess how they're going to show it to you, I think. I don't want to say more than that about it. It's a wonderful film, and it stars an amazing actor called Jesse Plemons, who was in a film recently called Civil War, ginger-headed guy, and he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant in Breaking Bad as the kind of biker family member who controls Walter White and Jesse in that film. So it's got a great cast. The director's got a real track record. He also made the film The Lobster, which is all these films are very strange. This one is particularly strange. It's Welcome to the World of Bugonia, and the big question is she or isn't she the leader of all the aliens about to destroy planet Earth?
Shall we have a little look at this and see what that's about?
What is it?
Skills and identities.
To foster a new generation of... Okay, let's go again.
They want you to think it's you, that it's you who made this world. But it's always been them. All we've lost, all that's been done to us, we're setting that right again. Greetings. Welcome to the headquarters of the human resistance.
Where's my hair?
Your hair has been destroyed to prevent you from contacting your ship.
What ship?
Your mother.
Good heavens. Well, that's quite the twist, isn't it? I mean, is this what's happened to me, getting rid of my hair to prevent me from returning to the mothership?
No,
I'm not sure.
because we know you're the leader of an alien race, Phil Dave. The technocrat, that's what you are.
I've been called an alien on many an occasion, I can promise you. But anyway, and this does look, and what I quite like about this is I enjoy a screen experience that offers twists and turns that you don't quite expect. You sort of think that you've guessed the measure of it, and then suddenly the opposite happens. I quite like things like this. So this actually does sound right up my street. In particular, it's stark contrast to a film that I believe came out around 2018, starring the dancer Michael Flatley. I don't know if you've ever had the fortune of seeing this, called Blackbird, which I have to tell you was the most predictive, cliche production I think I've ever seen in my life. And our very own Peter Cardwell is mildly obsessed with that film, so I'm perfectly sure he'll tell you about it another time. We've got to keep it tight, so let's move on slightly just to the last choice you've got, which is One Battle After Another.
This film is amazing. It's action-packed. It's thought-provoking. It's based on a novel by a very reclusive but genius novelist who should get the Nobel Prize, called Thomas Pynchon, who's an American novelist. He wrote novels like V, Gravity's Rainbow, and he wrote one a while ago called Vineland, and it's set in a nearest future, but also kind of back in the past. So it's a retro future, if that makes sense. There's been an American revolutionary movement. Leonardo DiCaprio had been a member of it. He moved away from it to look after his daughter, or is she his daughter? Sean Penn's in this as an amazing character called Colonel Stephen Lockjaw, who's a caricature militarist. So it's a kind of satire on Trump's America, very much a satire on the Democrats misjudging things. It's involving illegal immigrants. It's got a science fiction-y twist. It's got amazing car chases. As I say, it's that rare thing. It's an intellectual action movie. So move over Arnold Schwarzenegger, Leonardo DiCaprio. I think, honestly, Sean Penn might get an Oscar for best supporting for playing Colonel Lockjaw, because he's fantastic in it. Here's the trailer, One Battle After Another, out now. Make sure you see it.
Not a he, a she, or a they. How apt is that for this audience?
So I told you, it's a meditation on that Pynchon novel by it. It's not a straight adaptation. That would be impossible. And you got a glimpse there of Sean Penn as Colonel Lockjaw, who's fantastic in that film. So all you wish yourself, Phil. Thanks for showing it. And I should say very quickly, we lost some big names last year. The tragic death of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, that great director David Lynch, also Robert Redford and again Val Kilmer, so loads, and Diane Keaton. So it's kind of a bittersweet year for movie lovers.
Yeah, no, it's not bad actually. When you sort of put all the names together, it's been a bit of a terrible year really for Lost, actually, if you put it like that. Look, Paul, you know full well that I could speak to you indefinitely, but regrettably, clock is always the enemy in this business. So I will just look forward to hopefully catching up with you sometime maybe next week to talk things tech. So I might crop up on your show. Meanwhile,
every Tuesday morning, me, Paul Ross, and Phil Dave, and he gives us tomorrow's tech news today, courtesy of the chic geek himself, Phil Dave.
Where, of course, Mr. Ross will be with you, of course, from 1 a.m. on TalkSport overnight. You do that throughout the week, so absolutely make sure that if you are one of the night lovers, that you do tune in, because you're not just on TalkSport, you're on Talk as well. You have to have two stations. That's how important you are.
Sadly, not two salaries, but I'm working on it.
That's not much.
That's a dream. That's a dream.
Possibly comment. Paul, thank you very much as ever. It's an absolute treat to speak to you on Boxing Day. Really appreciate it. Right, loads of messages and calls coming up right after this. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Coming towards the end of this little extravaganza for mid-morning here on Talk with me, Phil Dave, with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. But don't worry, we've got some great programmes coming up this afternoon here on Talk, so absolutely don't go anywhere. And I'm sure be delighted to hear that I will return 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, just in case you're missing me already. Want to get some of your calls? We're going to do that in just a moment's time. Just very quickly before I do that, we've got a voice note from Sharon on the King's Speech. Hello, Sharon.
Morning, Phil. I didn't see the King's Speech live, but I've been online and watched it. And my impression of this is that he's coming down on the side of the minorities in this country. and not the majority. So when the king is setting, the minorities against the majority, he obviously is on their side, and it's sad to see, because his mum never picked a side. She never seemed to. She always stayed in the middle of the road and never went on either side. So she made us all feel that we all belonged together. Whereas I think now Charles has picked a side, and really I think that's the downside of royalty now. If his son doesn't come in and change that, I think that nobody will look up to them anymore. Anyway, that's my view. Good show anyway, Phil, and welcome to Talk Radio. Bye. Sharon from Yorkshire.
Thank you very much indeed, Sharon from Yorkshire. You'll be delighted to hear that I have been a part of this fine establishment for about 6.5 years, but it's always nice to be welcomed into somewhere after 6.5 years, so thank you very much indeed for that, Sharon. I do appreciate it. However, I would point out that as much as I personally think that there are many, many people who agree with exactly what you've said, Sharon, I just struggle to see that the king is picking a side as such. I desperately think he's just trying to create some sort of unity, but possibly not going about it the right way. I'm going to come to Paul, who's in Canada, in just a moment's time. Hold that thought. And Richard in North London, don't you go anywhere. I just want to read a couple of messages before I forget them. Pam has messaged to say, Happy Christmas. I am 80 and for the first time for as long as I can remember, I did not listen or watch the King's speech. From what I have heard and read this morning, the overwhelming number of people are not happy. The King is the head of the Anglican Church and leader of the faith, not faiths. Agree with that completely. I am so grateful that for so many years the Queen reigned over this country, and saddened to hear so many saying, not my king. Sadly, I feel the same. Interesting, Pam. She goes on to say that the King knew at a young age what was expected of him as the King, and we should not be at all surprised at his conduct when he broke the rules years ago. Hopefully, Prince William will be stronger and be more like his amazing grandmother, non-political, with Christianity at his heart. Pam, that's a really strong message. Thank you very much indeed for that. I really do appreciate it. Come back to your messages in just a moment, but let's tease the calls no further, because Paul is all the way in Canada. Hello, Paul. Good morning, I should say to you, Paul.
Yes, it's just before 8 o'clock here, so I've just woken up.
What are you doing up on Boxing Day at this hour? You should be having a lie-in, man.
I've just been out for a walk, and it's about -5 or 6 or something like that here, but it's lovely. What I wanted.
It's not so lovely when it's that weather in London, I promise you, because it's very cold here as well today. It's freezing. Not quite as bad as -5. But anyway, Paul, I do apologise. I interrupted you. What would you like to say?
That's okay. We're prepared for it here. First of all, Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and to you.
What I wanted to say about the speech was less about the content. It was more about the setting.
Okay. So this was in the Lady Chapel in Westminster Abbey, yeah?
Yeah. When the Queen used to do it, she used to sit in an armchair in a sort of a living room setting, and you felt like she was talking to you as though she was one of your family. Whereas Charles, in contrast, he had to be in Westminster Abbey. He had to have a trumpet fanfare followed by the choir singing God Save the King. And it just set the wrong scene for me. It made it feel as though he was being really sort of patronizing and condescending rather than talking to you I know he's not an equal in that sense, but almost like as though he was a friend of yours.
I do have to say, though, Paul, that, I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to be correct on this, but from what I can remember of Her Late Majesty's speech, I'm fairly sure that it used to start off with the national anthem. I could be wrong about that, but I'm quietly confident. So I don't think that of all the things that we could pick up on it, that necessarily that's one of them. But of course, if that's how you feel, you're perfectly welcome to feel like that, of course. But it's interesting what you say about the setting, though, because there's one thing that I have noticed the King does when he does broadcast, and he did this actually when I don't know if you recently saw the video he put out about his cancer treatment. He did something very similar where he sort of does this sort of dramatic look down and then look up again at the camera. I don't know if you picked up on this, but have a look at it. And if you haven't seen this, watch it back and you'll see what I mean. It's almost like he's sort of contemplative. It's sort of a contemplative mood. He's deep in thought. He'll look down and then suddenly look up and carry on. And I don't think that's an edit. I think that's deliberate. So it's curious the way he does deliver his Christmas message. But look, for many people, Paul, it was really about more the content in particular that a lot of people were finding quite difficult to digest. I'm moving on because I want to try and squeeze another caller. But Paul, I'm so grateful for your call. Thank you very much indeed for calling. Hope you have a wonderful Boxing Day over there in Canada. Enjoy the day that lies ahead. Let's go to Richard, who's in North London. Richard, a very good afternoon to you.
Hello. Yes, I think the simple fact of the matter is that he is an increasingly political king. I decided to become a Republican after his King's speech last year, when after the horrors that we were starting to realise about the rape gangs and the riots after Southport, he seemed to be taking the government side in terms of saying, well, diversity works. So the reality is, many of us don't think diversity works. We've got the most horrifying problem of these rape gangs. I don't think any other country in Europe has got a problem where we've welcomed people into our country, and 20 years later we have migrant rape gangs that have raped perhaps tens of thousands of young Indigenous girls. And I'd go further. When Donald Trump says, he said last week, or rather he supported a tweet last week saying that the British have effectively shown cowardice and now their civilization is in collapse. I think he's right. And I think the reality is we simply can't see it. But I wish there was a Republican Party in this country where we could start making a real rebellion, because I don't think frankly, I don't think even many of you people in the media get it. That man, the World War II veteran, the man who was 100 years of age, he said in October that the sacrifice of the men who fought in war wasn't worth it. Now, that's an unbelievable thing to say, but he's basically right. And I'd rather listen to him than to listen to this king. And as far as I'm concerned, I've always regarded the monarchy as something like a waxwork anyway, but now it's more like a wax woke. It's pointless. I'm done with it.
Well, Richard, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. I'm truly sorry to hear you think like that. Genuinely am, because I do still believe that there is a good future that lies ahead for the monarchy in this country, and I very much hope that it continues in the more traditional sense with the years that lie ahead. And look, for what it's worth, I genuinely hope that His Majesty King Charles does come to realise that actually the